The sound of expensive silk tearing is louder than you think, especially when it happens in a silent church. I watched from the back row as my daughter-in-law tried to stand up for the cutting of the cake. She pulled, she strained, and then rip. The back of her $8,000 custom gown didn't just tear, it disintegrated, leaving her exposed and humiliated in front of 300 guests. She screamed my name, accusing me of ruining her big day. She didn't know that 3 hours earlier I had watched her pour industrial strength glue onto the chair meant for my disabled wife while my son filmed it for TikTok. She wanted a viral moment. I gave her one. But she forgot one thing. When you play a game of pain with a man who spent 40 years in logistics, you better make sure you check the seating chart first. Before I tell you how I turned their cruel prank into a divorce settlement, please let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to protect a loved one from a snake in the family. My name is Elijah. I am 74 years old. I am a black man who grew up in a time and place where you had to fight for every inch of ground you stood on. I spent 4 decades building a logistics empire, moving cargo across oceans and borders, ensuring that things arrived exactly where they were supposed to be. I retired with $8 million in the bank and a reputation for being a man of his word. But my greatest treasure isn't my portfolio, it is Beatrice, my wife of 50 years. Beatrice is the kind of woman who softens the hard edges of the world. She is grace personified. But lately, she has been fragile. 3 months ago, she underwent a total hip replacement surgery. The recovery has been brutal. She walks with a walker and every movement costs her a grimace of pain. Yet she never complains, especially not about our son Dante. Dante is 32 years old. He is my only child. And God forgive me for saying this, but he is a disappointment. He is handsome, charming, and utterly spineless. He has never held a job for more than 6 months. He lives in a house I bought, drives a car I insured, and eats food paid for by my dividends. I always hoped he would find a good woman who would straighten him out. Instead, he found Tiffany. Tiffany is 26. She is white blonde and addicted to attention. She calls herself an influencer, but as far as I can tell, her only influence is making my son drain his bank account. She is loud, rude, and obsessed with online pranks. I tolerated her because Dante seemed happy. I paid for this wedding. $150,000 for a vineyard in Napa Valley. I paid for the flowers. I paid for the catering. I even paid for the dress she was wearing. I thought I was being a good father. I thought I was buying their happiness. I didn't know I was funding my wife's torture. The incident happened 2 hours before the ceremony. The guests hadn't arrived yet. The great hall of the vineyard was empty save for the staff setting up the tables in the back. I had arrived early to check the sound system. My hearing isn't what it used to be, so I wanted to make sure the microphones were calibrated correctly for the vows. I wanted to hear every word. I was standing in the shadows behind a large floral arrangement near the head table when I heard them. The giggling. It was a nasty conspiratorial sound. I peered through the leaves. There at the center of the head table stood Tiffany and Dante. Tiffany was still in her silk robe, not yet dressed in her gown. She was holding a large orange bottle. I recognized it immediately. Gorilla Glue, the kind that expands as it dries, the kind that bonds wood to stone. Dante was standing next to her, holding his phone up. He was recording. "Do it, babe," Dante whispered. "The lighting is perfect." Tiffany uncapped the glue. She leaned over a specific chair. I squinted. It was a high-backed velvet chair with a cushion, a special chair I had requested specifically for Beatrice because it offered the lumbar support she needed for her hip. "Watch this," Tiffany said to the camera phone, her voice dripping with malice. "So the old hag just got a new hip, right? She moves like a snail. We are going to put a generous layer of this stuff right on her cushion." She began to squeeze the bottle. A thick amber liquid oozed onto the pristine white velvet. She didn't just use a drop. She swirled it around, covering the entire seating area. Tiffany laughed. It was a cold, cruel sound. "When she sits down for the toasts, it will take about 10 minutes to set," she explained to the camera. "When she tries to stand up, she is going to be stuck. Literally. Imagine the look on her face. She won't be able to get up. She will probably pee her pants right there in front of everyone because she can't move fast enough." Dante snickered. "Hey, that is going to be gold. 5 million views easy. What caption should we use?" "How about mother-in-law stuck in her ways?" Tiffany suggested, squeezing the last of the glue onto the chair. Or maybe broken hip, broken chair. She stepped back, admiring her handiwork. The glue was clear enough that in the dim lighting of the reception hall no one would notice it until it was too late. If she ruins the cushion, who cares? Tiffany added. Elijah paid for it anyway. He pays for everything. Stupid old man. I stood there frozen. My hands clenched into fists so tight my knuckles ached. I wasn't angry. Anger is a hot emotion. Anger burns out. What I felt was something colder, something deeper. It was the absolute zero of a man realizing that his kindness has been mistaken for weakness. They were going to humiliate Beatrice. They were going to take a woman who was in physical pain, a woman who had welcomed Tiffany into our home, and turn her pain into a joke for the internet. And my son, my own flesh and blood, was the cameraman. I wanted to step out. I wanted to shout. I wanted to overturn the table and throw them out of the vineyard. But then I remembered who I was. I was Elijah. I didn't solve problems with noise. I solved them with logistics. I pulled out my own phone. My hand was steady. I hit record. I filmed them through the gaps in the flowers. I filmed Tiffany holding the empty glue bottle. I filmed Dante laughing. I filmed the wet, glistening patch on Beatrice's chair. Okay, let's go get dressed, Tiffany said, capping the empty bottle. I can't wait for the speeches. This is going to be the best prank ever. They ran off toward the bridal suite, giggling like school children. I waited until the heavy oak doors swung shut behind them. The hall was silent again. The only sound was the humming of the refrigerator in the bar. I stepped out from the shadows. I walked slowly to the head table. My footsteps were muffled by the thick carpet. I looked at the chair. The glue was settling into the fabric. It looked like a wet stain, but in an hour it would be hard as rock and sticky as tar. I looked at the place card on the table in front of the chair. It was written in elegant gold calligraphy. Mother of the groom. I looked to the right, the next chair over, the chair at the absolute center of the table, the chair with the highest back and the most prominent position. The place card read, The Bride. I looked at the bride's chair. It was clean. It was safe. I looked back at Beatrice's chair. The trap. I didn't hesitate. I didn't overthink it. I reached out and picked up the card that said Mother of the Groom. I picked up the card that said The Bride. And I swapped them. I moved Beatrice's place setting, the crystal glass, the silver fork, the napkin over to the clean chair. I moved Tiffany's place setting over to the glue-covered chair. It was a simple adjustment, a matter of logistics. Cargo A goes to destination B. Cargo B goes to destination A. I stepped back to review my work. To the casual observer, nothing had changed. The table looked perfect. But functionally, the entire dynamic of the evening had just shifted. Tiffany hadn't just glued a chair. She had glued her own fate. I checked my watch. The ceremony would start in 90 minutes. The reception would follow an hour later. That gave the glue exactly enough time to become tacky and dangerous. I walked out of the hall. I went to the parking lot where Beatrice was waiting in the car. Elijah, she asked as I opened the door for her. You look pale. Is everything okay with the sound system? I looked at my wife. Her face was lined with age and pain, but her eyes were still the same eyes I fell in love with 50 years ago. She was holding a small box. Inside was a diamond necklace, a family heirloom she planned to give to Tiffany as a welcome gift. Everything is perfect, Beatrice, I said, kissing her forehead. The sound is clear, and everything is exactly in its right place. She smiled. You are such a perfectionist, Elijah. That is why I love you. I helped her out of the car. She leaned heavily on her walker, wincing as her new hip took the weight. I promise you, Beatrice, I whispered to her, though she didn't hear me. No one is going to hurt you today. Not on my watch. We walked toward the chapel. The sun was shining over the vines. It was a beautiful day for a wedding. But as I walked, I wasn't thinking about vows or cake. I was thinking about physics. I was thinking about the tensile strength of Gorilla Glue versus the tensile strength of silk. I knew the answer, and in a few hours, 300 people would know it too. The ceremony began. Tiffany walked down the aisle looking like an angel in that $8,000 dress. She smiled at me as she passed. It was a smirk, really. She thought she had a secret. She thought she was the predator and I was the prey. I smiled back. Enjoy your walk, Tiffany, I thought, because it is the last time you are going to walk with dignity for a very long time. But I had to wait. Patience is a virtue, and revenge, like a good wine, needs to breathe. As they exchanged vows, I saw Tiffany wink at Dante. I saw Dante suppress a giggle. They were thinking about the chair. They were anticipating the moment Beatrice would try to stand up. I gripped my wife's hand. Just wait, I told myself. Just wait for the sound. The reception was about to begin, and the tearing sound was going to be the music I had been waiting for all my life. The Napa Valley sun was high and unforgiving, beating down on the rows of meticulously groomed grapevines. It was the kind of setting you see in bridal magazines, a landscape of rolling green hills and golden light that costs a fortune to rent for an afternoon. I had written the check for this venue myself, $150,000. It was enough money to feed a neighborhood in Chicago for a month, yet here we were burning it in 6 hours so my son could pretend he was royalty. I stood at the entrance of the open-air chapel, adjusting the cuffs of my tuxedo. I watched my wife Beatrice make her way from the car. It was painful to watch. She was using her walker, the gray metallic frame clashing with her elegant navy blue mother-of-the-groom dress. Every step was a battle. I could see the way her jaw tightened with each movement of her right leg. That hip replacement was only 3 months old. The doctor had told her to rest, to stay in bed, but Beatrice is a woman of tradition. She would not miss her only son's wedding, not even if she had to crawl down the aisle. I walked over and offered her my arm, taking the weight off the walker. She looked up at me and smiled. Her face was lined with 70 years of life and 50 years of loving a stubborn man like me, but her eyes were still bright. "You look beautiful, Bea," I whispered. She patted my hand. "And you look handsome, Elijah, but fix your tie. It is crooked." We made our way to the front row. The guests were filing in. I looked around. I didn't recognize half of them. On the groom's side, there were a few of our relatives, my cousins from Detroit, and some of my old business partners. But the bride's side was a carnival. It was filled with young people holding tripods, girls with lips that looked too full to be real, and guys wearing sunglasses indoors. These weren't friends. They were followers. They were the audience for the show Tiffany was directing. Before the ceremony began, there was a small, planned moment for the exchange of family gifts. It was supposed to be private, just the parents and the couple, but of course Tiffany had her videographer standing 2 feet away, the lens intrusive and unblinking. Beatrice reached into her purse. Her hands were trembling slightly, not from age, but from the exertion of standing. She pulled out a velvet box. It was worn at the corners. Tiffany Beatrice said, her voice soft and shaky. "This belonged to Elijah's mother. She wore it when she came up north during the Great Migration. It has been in our safe for 40 years. We want you to have it. Welcome to the family." Beatrice opened the box. Inside lay a diamond and sapphire pendant. It was heavy, old-school craftsmanship, the kind of jewelry you cannot buy at a mall. I had had it appraised last year for insurance purposes, $15,000, but the sentimental value was incalculable. It was the only thing my mother had left to give me when she passed. Tiffany took the box. She didn't look at Beatrice, she looked at the camera lens. She tilted the box so the light would catch the stones, making a pouty face for the video. "Oh, that is so sweet," Tiffany said. Her voice was high-pitched, the voice she used for her fans. "Thank you, Mom." She leaned in to give Beatrice a side hug, careful not to wrinkle her own dress. Then she turned to Dante. She leaned in close to his ear, shielding her mouth from the camera, but not from me. She didn't know about my new hearing aids. I had just upgraded to the latest Starkey models last week. They have a directional microphone feature that can pick up a whisper across a crowded room. I had tuned them to focus on the altar. I heard her voice clear as a bell, sharp and dripping with disdain. "This feels super light, babe. It is probably fake. Glass and cubic zirconia. Typical. Dante, my son, the boy I raised to respect his elders, didn't defend his mother. He didn't say, 'Tiffany, that is my grandmother's legacy.' He just chuckled nervously and whispered back, 'Just wear it for the photos. We can sell it later if it is real.' My blood ran cold. The rage I felt earlier when I saw the glue was a spark. Now it was an inferno. They were discussing pawning my mother's heritage while my wife stood there in agony, smiling at them with pure love. I gripped the handle of Beatrice's walker. I wanted to stop the wedding right there. I wanted to take the necklace back and tell everyone to go home. But I looked at Beatrice. She was so happy. She was wiping a tear from her eye, believing she had just gained a daughter. I couldn't break her heart. Not yet. I had to let the trap spring. I had to let them destroy themselves. The ceremony began. If you could call it a ceremony, it felt more like a live broadcast. The priest, a hired actor who looked the part, began to speak about love and commitment. But Tiffany wasn't listening. She was busy signaling to her friend in the front row, a girl with pink hair who was managing the live stream. Tiffany kept adjusting her dress, turning her good side to the camera. When it came time for the vows, she pulled out her phone. She literally read her vows off her iPhone screen. Dante, you are my soulmate and my best content partner, she read, pausing for dramatic effect. I promise to love you, to tag you, and to build our brand together until death or a band do us part. A ripple of laughter went through the bride's side. They thought it was witty. I sat there stone-faced. Beside me, Beatrice looked confused. Is that normal vows now, Elijah? She whispered to me. No, B, I said grimly. Nothing about this is normal. Dante read his vows. They were generic, clearly written by someone else, probably ChatGPT. He promised to support her dreams and be her rock. I looked at him and thought, you are not a rock, son. You are sand, and the tide is coming in. When the priest pronounced them husband and wife, Dante went to kiss her. Tiffany held up a finger to stop him. She turned to the videographer. Did we get the lighting right? Let's do the kiss again. Wait for the sun to come out from that cloud. They waited 30 seconds at the altar holding a pose while the guests sat in awkward silence. Finally, the sun broke through. Okay now, Tiffany commanded. They kissed. It was performative, theatrical, and completely devoid of intimacy. As they walked back down the aisle, the guests threw white rose petals. Tiffany stopped 3 times to take selfies with the petals raining down. She didn't even look at Beatrice, who was struggling to stand up to honor the recession. We moved to the reception hall. It was an open-air pavilion covered in vines. A long head table was set up on a raised platform overlooking the guests. This was the moment. I walked slowly behind Beatrice, matching her painful pace. We approached the head table. I saw the chairs. They were high-backed, upholstered in white velvet. Beautiful chairs, identical chairs. I watched Tiffany approach the table. She was glowing with the adrenaline of being the center of attention. She walked with a swagger, her massive silk skirt rustling around her. She walked straight to the center of the table. She looked at the place cards. I held my breath. 2 hours ago, I had walked into this empty hall. I had seen the glob of drying glue on the chair marked Mother of the Groom. I hadn't just swapped the cards. That would have been too risky. Tiffany might have recognized the glue stain. No. I had physically picked up the heavy wooden chair covered in glue. I had moved it 2 spots to the left. I had placed it directly in the center at the spot reserved for the bride. Then I had taken the pristine, clean chair from the bride's spot and moved it to the mother's spot. I had swapped the furniture itself. And then I had placed the name card, the bride, right in front of the glue chair. Tiffany arrived at her spot. She glanced at the card. The bride. She didn't look at the seat cushion. Why would she? She was too busy waving to the cheering crowd. She was too busy looking at her reflection in the back of a spoon. She looked over at the spot where Beatrice was heading. The spot marked Mother of the Groom. I saw a small, wicked smile curl on Tiffany's lips. She nudged Dante. Watch this, she mouthed. She thought the glue was over there. She thought she was about to watch my wife suffer. Beatrice reached her chair. She turned slowly, gripping the armrests. She lowered herself down with a sigh of relief. Oh, this cushion is soft, Beatrice said to me. Thank goodness. She was sitting on the clean chair. Safe. Then Tiffany turned. She grabbed the skirt of her $8,000 dress. She gathered the layers of silk and tulle. She positioned herself in front of her throne. She sat down. She sat down hard with the confidence of a queen taking her castle. I saw her shift her weight, settling in. I saw the thick, tacky, industrial glue squish beneath the layers of her dress, soaking into the fabric, bonding the silk to the velvet cushion. She didn't feel it yet. The dress was too thick. But the chemical reaction had begun. The bond was forming. She smiled at the camera. She raised her glass of champagne. To us, she shouted. I sat down next to Beatrice. I unfolded my napkin. To justice, I whispered to myself. The dinner service began. Salads were served. Speeches were made. For 45 minutes, Tiffany sat there. She ate her salad. She drank 3 glasses of wine. She laughed at Dante's terrible jokes. All the while under the table, the Gorilla Glue was curing. It was turning into a solid, unbreakable plastic, fusing the fibers of her dress to the upholstery of the chair. She was literally becoming part of the furniture. I ate my steak calmly. I enjoyed every bite. I watched Dante. He kept glancing at Beatrice, waiting for her to try to stand up. He was confused. Why wasn't she stuck? Why wasn't she panicking? He looked at Tiffany. She shrugged, mouthing, "Maybe it takes longer to dry." They were so stupid. They were so blinded by their own malice that they didn't realize the trap had already closed around their own legs. Then the moment arrived. The master of ceremonies, a loud man in a shiny suit, grabbed the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, "it is time for the tradition. Will the bride and groom please stand and proceed to the dance floor for the cutting of the cake?" The room erupted in applause. The spotlight swung around, hitting Tiffany in a blinding beam of white light. This was her moment, the moment she had rehearsed, the moment she was going to show off the full train of her dress. She put her hands on the table. She flashed a dazzling smile at the camera. She pushed down with her legs. She thrust her hips forward to stand up. She moved up about 3 inches. And then physics took over. The chair didn't let go. The sound that followed was not the romantic swish of silk. It was a violent, jagged tearing sound, like a sail ripping in a hurricane. Tiffany's momentum was stopped dead. Her body jerked backward as if she had been lassoed. The heavy wooden chair lifted off the ground, stuck to her rear end, and then slammed back down with a deafening thud. Tiffany lost her balance. She fell backward, her arms flailing. She grabbed the tablecloth to break her fall. Disaster. The tablecloth slid. The crystal glasses, the wine bottles, the floral centerpieces, everything came crashing down on top of her. Red wine splashed over her white bodice. Water soaked her hair. And through it all, she was still stuck to the chair. The music stopped. The applause died instantly. The room went completely silent. Then Tiffany screamed, "My dress! My dress! I can't move." She struggled like a trapped animal, kicking her legs. But the chair was heavy. It was anchored to her. She looked up, her eyes wild with confusion and panic. She looked at Dante, then she looked at Beatrice, and then she looked at me. I was sitting calmly sipping my coffee. I put the cup down on the saucer with a gentle clink. I looked her dead in the eye, and I smiled. The look of realization on her face was worth every penny of the $150,000. But she wasn't done yet. The humiliation was just beginning, because the camera she loved so much, the live stream she had set up to capture Beatrice's pain, it was still rolling, and it was broadcasting her downfall to the entire world in high definition. The sun had dipped below the rolling hills of Napa Valley, leaving the sky painted in bruised shades of purple and gold. Inside the open-air pavilion, the mood was deceptively perfect. The string quartet was playing a soft rendition of a pop song that cost me $2,000 to license. Waiters in white jackets moved like ghosts, refilling champagne flutes with a vintage that cost more per bottle than most people make in a day. For 60 minutes I sat there and ate my salmon. It was perfectly cooked pink in the center and flaky. I savored every bite. But what I was truly savoring was the physics happening 3 feet to my left. Tiffany was holding court at the center of the head table. She was in her element. She laughed at jokes that weren't funny, throwing her head back to expose her long neck to the cameras. She clinked glasses with Dante. She waved to her followers who were live streaming from table 4. She had no idea that she was sitting on a ticking time bomb. I watched her body language closely. Every 10 minutes or so, she would shift her weight. She would wiggle slightly in the chair, getting comfortable. Each time she did this, I knew what was happening. The Gorilla Glue was curing. It was seeping into the microscopic fibers of her $8,000 silk dress. It was bonding with the velvet cushion. It was creating a polymer chain that was stronger than steel. At one point, she leaned over to whisper something to Dante. As she leaned back, I saw the heavy wooden chair lift just a fraction of an inch off the ground. It had begun. The bond was solid. She was no longer just sitting on the chair. She was the chair. I looked at Beatrice beside me. She was enjoying her meal, blissfully unaware. She had finished her fish and was now picking at the raspberry tart. She turned to me and smiled. "Elijah, this is the most beautiful evening," she said. "Look at them. They look so happy." I looked at Dante and Tiffany. They did look happy. They looked like two predators who thought they had just gotten away with the perfect crime. "They are certainly memorable, Beatrice," I said, dabbing my mouth with a linen napkin. "This is a night no one will ever forget." I checked my watch. The glue had been setting for exactly 65 minutes. The manufacturer instructions say that full cure takes 24 hours, but functional load-bearing strength is achieved in 1 hour. Tiffany weighed about 130 pounds. The glue could hold a gorilla. The math was not in her favor. Just then the music cut out. The master of ceremonies, a man with teeth so white they looked radioactive, bounded onto the stage. He tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen," he boomed, his voice echoing off the vineyard walls. "I hope you have enjoyed the dinner, but now it is time for the sweetest part of the evening." He swept his arm toward the giant 5-tier cake standing in the corner. "Will the bride and groom please rise and proceed to the dance floor for the ceremonial cutting of the cake?" The room erupted in applause. The guests turned their chairs. The videographers rushed into position, forming a semicircle around the head table to capture the bride's grand exit. This was it, the moment Tiffany lived for. The spotlight hit her blindingly bright. She beamed. She grabbed Dante's hand. She didn't just want to stand up. She wanted to launch herself. She wanted to make a statement. She wanted to pop up like a runway model, full of energy and grace, showing off the full length of that custom-made gown. She planted her feet firmly on the floor. She gripped Dante's hand. She pushed down with her legs. She threw her hips forward with force. And then it happened. The sound was not a soft rustle. It was not a gentle swish. It was a violence. It sounded like a canvas sail being shredded in a hurricane. It was a jagged, tearing noise that cut through the applause like a gunshot. Tiffany's upper body shot forward, but her lower body stayed anchored to the planet. The silk of her dress, the delicate imported fabric that I had paid $8,000 for, could not withstand the force. The back of the dress exploded. The fabric tore from the waistline all the way down to the hem. But the structural failure wasn't just the skirt, it was the bodice. The glue held the fabric so tight against the cushion that as she lunged forward, the dress ripped completely away from her body. But the momentum was too much. The heavy oak chair, which weighed at least 40 pounds, lifted into the air, attached to her rear end. It hovered for a split second, a wooden parasite clinging to her. Then gravity reclaimed it. The chair slammed back down onto the platform. The weight of it pulled Tiffany off balance. She wasn't expecting the resistance. She flailed her arms, trying to catch herself. Dante let go of her hand in shock. Tiffany fell backward, hard. She crashed back onto the chair, but she kept going. She tipped over. Her hands grabbed blindly for support. She caught the edge of the white tablecloth. "No, no, no," she screamed, but it was too late. As she toppled backward off the raised platform, she dragged the tablecloth with her. The centerpiece, a massive arrangement of hydrangeas and roses, crashed down on her head. The open bottles of red wine toppled over, splashing dark crimson liquid all over the exposed white corset she was wearing underneath. Crystal glasses shattered against the floor, sending shards flying. Tiffany landed on her back on the floor below the platform with her legs in the air, still attached to the chair. The room went instantly silent. 300 people froze. The string quartet stopped playing. The waiters stopped pouring. Even the crickets seemed to stop chirping. For 3 seconds, the only sound was the dripping of wine onto the floor. Then came the visual. Tiffany was lying in a pile of broken glass and flowers. The entire back of her dress was missing. It was still glued to the seat of the chair, which was now upside down on top of her. She was exposed, wearing only her white bridal lingerie, which was rapidly turning purple from the spilled Cabernet. She looked like a bird that had been shot out of the sky. Then the silence broke. It started with a single giggle from the back of the room. Then a gasp, then a murmur that swelled into a roar of confusion and shock. Tiffany pushed the chair off her legs. She scrambled to her feet, but she couldn't run. The back of her dress was gone. She was half naked. She looked down at her ruined gown. She looked at the chair lying on its side with the silk fabric fused to the cushion. And then she lost her mind. She didn't cry. She didn't cover herself. She turned red with a rage that shook her entire body. She looked at the chair. She looked at the glue stain that was now visible on the velvet. And then she screamed the words that would seal her fate. "Who changed the seats?" She shrieked, her voice cracking with hysteria. She pointed a trembling finger at the table. "That wasn't my chair. That was the mother of the groom chair. I put the glue on that one." The room gasped. She realized too late what she had said, but the adrenaline was pumping too hard. She couldn't stop. She looked at Beatrice, who was sitting quietly with her hands over her mouth in shock. "It was supposed to be you," she screamed at my wife. "You were supposed to be stuck, you old hag. You ruined my dress. You ruined my viral moment." Dante jumped down from the platform, trying to cover her with his jacket. "Tiffany, shut up," he hissed. "You are on camera." "Get off me," Tiffany yelled, pushing him away. She looked around the room, her eyes wild, searching for a scapegoat. "Who did this?" she demanded, stamping her foot. "Who swapped the name cards? I know I put the glue on the end chair. I know it." I slowly stood up. I picked up my cane. I adjusted my jacket. I walked to the edge of the platform and looked down at her. She looked up at me. Her mascara was running. Her hair was matted with wine and flower petals. "Elijah," she whispered. I didn't shout. I didn't need to. I spoke into the silence, and my voice carried to every corner of the room. "You are right, Tiffany," I said. "You did put the glue on that chair. I watched you do it. And I watched you laugh about how my wife, my disabled wife, would pee herself because she couldn't stand up." I gestured to the ruined dress and the wreckage on the floor. "It seems the glue works very well," I observed. "Gorilla Glue is an excellent product for bonding, but it is terrible for silk." Tiffany stared at me, her mouth open. "You?" she gasped. "You changed the seats." I nodded. "I work in logistics, Tiffany. My job is to ensure that every package arrives at the correct destination, and today I decided that this package was addressed to you." The crowd erupted, but not in the way she wanted. It wasn't applause. It was the sound of 300 people realizing they were witnessing a war. The phones that were live streaming were zooming in on her face. The comments were scrolling so fast they were a blur. She wasn't a victim. She was a villain caught in her own trap. Tiffany looked at the cameras. She realized her 5 million views were happening right now, but the caption wasn't mother-in-law prank. It was bride destroys herself. She let out a primal scream of humiliation. She turned and ran. She ran out of the reception hall, her tattered dress flapping behind her, exposing her wine-soaked lingerie to the night air. Dante looked at me. He looked at his mother. Then he looked at the exit. He made the wrong choice. He ran after her. I sat back down. I picked up my wine glass, which had miraculously survived the table flip. I looked at Beatrice. She was trembling. "Did she really try to glue me, Elijah?" she whispered. I took her hand. "Yes, B. She did. But don't worry. The trash just took itself out." I took a sip of wine. It was a bold Cabernet with notes of blackberry and oak. It tasted like victory. But the night wasn't over. Tiffany had run away, but she hadn't learned her lesson. She was about to make the mistake of declaring war on a man who controlled the bank account she was using to pay for her getaway car. Tomorrow morning the invoice would arrive, and that tearing sound she just heard was nothing compared to the sound of her credit score being shredded. The scene on the floor of the reception hall was something between a tragedy and a slapstick comedy, but nobody was laughing. My daughter-in-law was lying in a pile of broken glass and crushed flowers, her legs kicking in the air like an overturned beetle. The heavy oak chair was still firmly attached to her backside, the white silk of her ruined dress fused to the velvet cushion by the industrial glue she had intended for my wife. Dante scrambled down from the platform. He was in a panic. He didn't look like a groom anymore. He looked like a terrified boy who had broken a vase and didn't know how to fix it. He grabbed Tiffany's arm, trying to pull her up. "Get it off me!" Tiffany shrieked, her voice shredding the silence of the room. "Get this thing off me, Dante!" Dante grabbed the legs of the chair and pulled. It was a foolish move. The chair was bonded to the dress, and the dress was strapped tightly to Tiffany's body. When he pulled, he didn't separate the chair from the bride, he just dragged the bride across the floor. "Ow, you idiot, stop!" Tiffany screamed, slapping his hands away. "You are hurting me!" She scrambled to her knees, the chair bumping against her calves. It was a humiliating sight. She was half naked, exposed to 300 guests, her expensive lingerie stained with red wine and the wreckage of her dignity trailing behind her. And then the shock wore off and the malice kicked in. Tiffany needed a villain. She needed someone to blame because in her world, she could never be the architect of her own destruction. She whipped her head around, her mascara running in black streaks down her face, making her look like a deranged raccoon. Her eyes locked onto Beatrice. My wife was sitting perfectly still at the head table, her hands folded in her lap. She looked confused and frightened by the violence of the scene. "You," Tiffany screamed, pointing a trembling finger at Beatrice. "You did this." The accusation hung in the air, heavy and toxic. "You swapped the seats," Tiffany yelled, scrambling to her feet but unable to stand fully upright because of the weight of the chair. "You knew. You jealous old witch. You knew I was going to prank you and you swapped the name cards. You wanted to ruin my wedding." A murmur went through the crowd. I saw people looking at Beatrice. I saw doubt in their eyes. They saw a young, beautiful bride in ruins and an old woman sitting calmly. Human nature is a fickle thing, is A.E. For a second, the narrative started to shift. Maybe the mother-in-law really was the monster. Dante looked at his mother. "Mom," he asked, his voice cracking, "did you do this? Did you touch the chairs?" Beatrice's lip trembled. "I don't understand," she whispered. "I just sat where the card said to sit." "Don't lie to me," Tiffany screeched. She grabbed a steak knife from the floor, brandishing it not as a weapon but as a tool of accusation. "You wanted to humiliate me. You hate that I am young. You hate that I am beautiful. Look at what you did to me." She began to sob. It was a loud, theatrical sobbing meant to garner sympathy, and it was working. I saw a few of her friends from the bride's side stand up, casting angry glares at my wife. That was enough. I had watched the circus. Now it was time to bring in the lion. I stood up. I didn't rush. I moved with the slow, deliberate weight of a man who owns the building. I picked up my cane not because I needed it, but because it gave me something to point with. I walked past Beatrice. I touched her shoulder gently. "It is okay, B," I said softly. "Watch the screen." I walked past Dante, who was still kneeling on the floor trying to unbutton the back of Tiffany's dress. He looked up at me, his eyes pleading for help. "Dad, do something," he said. "Help her. I am helping her." "Dante," I said, "I am helping her become famous." I walked over to the audiovisual station in the corner of the room. The DJ, a young kid with headphones around his neck, looked at me with wide eyes. He tried to block my way. "Sir, you can't be back here," he stammered. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a $100 bill. I placed it on his mixing board. "Take a break, son," I said. "Go get a drink." The kid looked at the money, looked at my face, and wisely stepped aside. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. I connected it to the HDMI cable that was meant to project a slideshow of Dante and Tiffany's childhood photos later in the evening. I tapped the screen. I walked back to the center of the room. I grabbed the microphone stand. The feedback squealed for a second, piercing the ears of everyone in the room. It silenced the murmurs. It silenced Tiffany's sobbing. Everyone looked at me. Tiffany stood there clutching the knife, the chair hanging off her rear end like a grotesque bustle. "What are you doing, Elijah?" she spat. "Are you going to lecture me?" "No, Tiffany," I said. My voice was calm, deep, and resonant. It was the voice I used to close million-dollar deals. It was the voice of truth. "You just accused my wife of ruining your wedding," I continued. "You accused a woman who can barely walk of playing a cruel prank on you. You wanted the world to see her humiliation. You wanted 5 million views on TikTok." Tiffany froze. Her eyes darted back and forth. "Well," I said, gesturing to the massive projection screen behind the head table, "I believe in giving the bride what she wants." The screen flickered to life. The image was grainy at first, then it snapped into focus. It was the video I had recorded 3 hours earlier. The timestamp was visible in the corner, 3:00 p.m. The audio boomed through the high-quality speakers of the reception hall. "Do it, babe. The lighting is perfect." That was Dante's voice, clear as day. On the screen, the guests watched as Tiffany in her silk robe uncapped the orange bottle of Gorilla Glue. They watched her squeeze the thick amber liquid onto the velvet cushion. "So the old hag just got a new hip, right?" the Tiffany on the screen said. Her voice was cruel mocking. "She moves like a snail. We are going to put a generous layer of this stuff right on her cushion." In the reception hall, the real Tiffany went pale. She dropped the steak knife. It clattered on the floor. The video continued. "When she tries to stand up, she is going to be stuck." Literally, the screen, Tiffany laughed. "Imagine the look on her face. She won't be able to get up. She will probably pee her pants right there in front of everyone." A collective gasp went through the room. It was the sound of 300 people having the air sucked out of their lungs. I saw Beatrice look at the screen, her hand covering her mouth. She finally understood. She realized that the accident wasn't an accident. She realized that the girl she had welcomed into our family, the girl she had just given a $15,000 necklace to, had planned to torture her for internet clout. The video played on. "If she ruins the cushion, who cares the screen?" Tiffany said. Elijah paid for it anyway. He pays for everything. Stupid old man. The video ended. The screen went black. The silence in the room was absolute. It was heavy, suffocating. I looked at Dante. He was staring at the floor, his face burning with shame. He couldn't look at me. He couldn't look at his mother. He had been exposed not just as a prankster, but as a coward who let his wife abuse his own mother. I looked at Tiffany. She was shaking. Her friends who had stood up to defend her were slowly sitting back down, distancing themselves from the social radioactive fallout. I raised the microphone to my lips one last time. "You wanted a viral moment, Tiffany," I said. "You wanted the world to see a prank. Well, here it is. I swapped the seats because I refuse to let you hurt the woman I love." I pointed at the camera phone that was still live streaming from table 4. "You wanted 1,000,000 views," I said. "I think you just got them. But they aren't laughing with you, Tiffany. They are laughing at you." Tiffany looked around the room. She saw the disgust on the faces of the guests. She saw her own parents holding their heads in their hands. She saw the waiters smirking. The humiliation broke her. She let out a scream that was pure animal rage. "I hate you," she screamed at me. "I hate all of you." She tried to run, but the chair was still attached. She stumbled, dragging the heavy wood across the dance floor. It was a pathetic sight. "Dante, help me," she wailed. "Get this off me." Dante looked at me. Then he looked at his mother. Beatrice was crying silently, tears streaming down her face. This was his moment. This was his chance to redeem himself, to walk over to his mother, apologize, and let the toxic woman go. But Dante was weak. He had always been weak. "I am coming, babe," he said. He grabbed a pair of heavy-duty scissors from the floral arrangement table. He ran to Tiffany. He didn't try to save the dress. He hacked at it. Rip. Snap. Tear. He cut the beautiful silk skirt that I had paid for. He cut through the layers of tulle. He cut until the dress fell away, leaving the chair behind. Tiffany stood there in her wine-stained corset and her torn stockings. She looked like a wreck. "Let's go, Dante," she screamed. "Get the keys." Dante threw the scissors down. He looked at me one last time. There was no apology in his eyes. Only resentment. Resentment that I had exposed him. He turned and ran after her. They ran out of the reception hall through the double doors and into the parking lot. I watched them go. My son chose the girl who tried to humiliate his mother. He chose the glue over the blood. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Beatrice. She had pulled herself up on her walker and made her way to me. "Elijah," she whispered. "They are gone." I put my arm around her. I felt her trembling. "Yes, B," I said. "They are gone." I looked at the empty doorway. I looked at the ruined cake. I looked at the confused guests. I signaled the waiters. "Pour the wine I ordered. The wedding is over. But the dinner is paid for. Everyone eat." I sat Beatrice down. But my mind wasn't on the food. My mind was already on the next step. Dante thought he could just run away. He thought he could drive off in the car I bought, go back to the house I owned, and spend the money I gave him. He was wrong. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I wasn't checking social media. I was opening my banking app. It was time to introduce Dante and Tiffany to a concept they were unfamiliar with. Consequences. I tapped the screen. Credit card Dante. Status active. I hit the button that said lock card. Then I opened the contact for my lawyer. They wanted to play games with glue. I was about to show them that financial bonds are much harder to break. And tomorrow morning, when they tried to check out of the honeymoon suite, they were going to find out exactly what it costs to insult Elijah. The morning after the wedding, the sun rose over Napa Valley with the same indifferent beauty as the day before. The vines were bathed in gold, but inside the honeymoon suite of the Vineyard Resort, the mood was anything but golden. I was sitting on the terrace of my own room 2 miles away, sipping a cup of Earl Grey tea. Beatrice was still asleep, exhausted from the emotional toll of the previous night. My phone rang at 8 a.m. sharp. I looked at the screen. Dante. I didn't answer immediately. I took a sip of tea. I let it ring. I wanted him to sweat. I wanted him to feel the anxiety of not having instant access to his safety net. Finally, on the last ring, I picked up. "Hello, Dante," I said, my voice calm. "Dad." Dante shouted. He didn't say good morning. He didn't ask about his mother. "You have to fix this. Do you know what is happening? Tiffany is a wreck. She has been crying all night. Her dress is ruined. Her reputation is ruined. The comments online are brutal, Dad. People are making memes of her with the chair stuck to her ass. I listened to him rant. I listened to the entitlement in his voice. He wasn't calling to apologize for his wife trying to glue his mother to a chair. He was calling to complain about the consequences. That is unfortunate, Dante, I said. But actions have consequences. Consequences, Dante screamed. This isn't a consequence. This is an attack. You humiliated us. Tiffany wants to sue you. She says you owe her for the dress. $8,000, Dad. Plus damages for emotional distress. She says if you transfer $50,000 to her account right now, she might consider not going to the press. I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. She wants $50,000, I repeated. Yes, Dante said. And an apology. A public apology. You need to go on video and say you set the whole thing up as a joke that went wrong. You need to take the blame. I put my teacup down. Let me get this straight, son. Your wife tried to physically assault your mother. You filmed it. And now you want me to pay you for the privilege of being abused. It was just a prank, Dante whined. It wasn't assault. You are blowing it out of proportion. Just pay the money, Dad. Don't make this uglier than it already is. I stood up and walked to the edge of the balcony. You are right, Dante, I said. I shouldn't make it uglier. I should make it fair. What does that mean? Dante asked, suspicious. It means that the wedding is over, I said. And now it is time to settle the bill. I hung up. I didn't give him time to call back. I dialed the number for the hotel management. Mr. Thorne, the manager, answered instantly. His voice was smooth, professional. We are so sorry about the disturbance at the reception last night. We hope you are satisfied with the service otherwise. I am very satisfied, I said. However, there has been a change in the billing instructions. Change, sir? The manager asked. Yes. You have my credit card on file for the final payment of the wedding package. The reception, the catering, the rooms. The total is roughly $150,000, correct? Yes, sir. We were about to run the charge this morning. Do not run that charge, I said. There was a pause. Sir, I am disputing the contract, I said. The contract stated that I was paying for a wedding, but what happened last night was not a wedding. It was a content creation event, a prank video production. I did not agree to fund a commercial enterprise. But sir, the services were rendered, the manager stammered. The food was eaten, the wine was drunk. I understand, I said. And the people who consumed those services should pay for them. I want you to transfer the entire bill to the room of the groom. Mr. Dante Thorne, he is the one who authorized the event. He is the one who turned it into a circus. He is the one responsible for the damages to your property, including the chair. But sir, does Mr. Thorne have the funds? The manager asked, his voice losing its smoothness. That is between you and him, I said. But my card is off the table. If you try to charge it, I will report it as fraud. And I have the video evidence to prove that the event was used for unauthorized commercial purposes, which violates your own venue policies, does it not? The manager went silent. He knew I was right. Most high-end venues have strict clauses about commercial filming. I will have to speak with the groom immediately, he said. Good luck, I said. I hung up. I imagined the scene. The manager in his crisp suit walking down the hallway, the knock on the door of the honeymoon suite. 30 minutes later, my phone rang again. It wasn't Dante. It was a notification from my bank. Alert transaction declined. Card ending in 4489. Amount $45,000. Merchant Napa Valley Resort. I smiled. Dante had tried to pay, or rather the manager had forced him to present a card, and Dante, being Dante, had handed over the supplementary credit card I had given him for emergencies. He didn't know I had locked it 10 hours ago. My phone rang again. It was Dante. This time he sounded hysterical. Dad, what did you do? He screamed. The manager is here. He has security with him. He says the card is declined. He says I owe $45,000 for the room and the extras. Just for the room, Dad. Not even the whole wedding. $45,000, I said coolly. That sounds about right. You ordered the Dom Perignon, didn't you? And the room service. And I assume they are charging you for the broken glassware and the ruined chair. Dad, fix this, Dante begged. They are threatening to call the police. They say it is theft of services. I don't have $45,000. You know I don't. You have a job, don't you, Dante? I asked, knowing full well he didn't. You have savings. You have a wife who is an influencer. Surely she can do a sponsored post to pay for the champagne. She is crying in the bathroom. Dante sobbed. She can't breathe. Dad, please. I am your son. You are a grown man, Dante, I said. And grown men pay their own bills. You wanted to be the star of the show. Well, the show costs money. But you promised, Dante cried. You promised to pay for the wedding. I promised to pay for a wedding, I said, my voice hard as iron. I didn't promise to pay for a public humiliation of your mother. The moment you turned that camera on, the moment you decided to monetize my wife's pain, you broke the contract. The deal is off. I hung up again. I turned off my phone. I went back inside the room. Beatrice was sitting up in bed, rubbing her eyes. Who was that Elijah? She asked. Just a telemarketer, B, I said, sitting on the edge of the bed. Someone trying to sell something we don't need. I took her hand. How is the hip? I asked. It hurts a little less today, she said. Good, I said. Get dressed. We are checking out. Where are we going? She asked. Home, I said. But we are taking the scenic route. I think we should stop for lunch in San Francisco, have some crab, watch the ocean. Beatrice smiled. That sounds lovely. We packed our bags. I carried them to the car. As we drove out of the valley, I passed the resort where Dante and Tiffany were staying. I saw a police cruiser turning into the driveway with its lights flashing. The manager hadn't been bluffing. Theft of services over $10,000 is a felony in California. I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I felt a pang of sadness. No father wants to see his son in the back of a police car. But I knew that if I bailed him out now, I would be bailing him out forever. He needed to hit the bottom. He needed to feel the cold, hard concrete of reality. I looked at Beatrice sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat. I had made a choice. I chose the woman who had stood by me for 50 years over the boy who had sold me out for 5 minutes of fame. It was the hardest choice of my life. But as I drove toward the Golden Gate Bridge, I knew it was the right one. But the war wasn't over. Dante and Tiffany were cornered rats, and cornered rats bite. They weren't going to go down quietly. They were going to try to hurt us one last time. When we got back to Chicago, we found out just how low they were willing to go. They didn't just want my money, they wanted my home. And they thought they had a legal right to it because of a mistake I made 3 years ago. A mistake called trust. The drive from Napa to Chicago is long, but silence makes it feel eternal. When Dante and Tiffany finally pulled up to the driveway of the house in the suburbs, they probably expected sanctuary. They probably expected to walk through the front door, collapse onto the leather sofa I paid for, and plot their next move against me. They were in for a surprise. I was sitting on the front porch in a rocking chair drinking iced tea. It was a humid afternoon and the sky was threatening rain. Perfect weather for an eviction. I watched as Dante's car, the BMW I had leased for him 3 years ago, turned into the driveway. He slammed on the brakes when he saw the scene on the front lawn. It looked like a yard sale gone wrong. Dozens of cardboard boxes were stacked haphazardly on the grass. Black garbage bags were piled up like sandbags against a flood. A ring light, the tool of Tiffany's trade, was leaning against a tree, its power cord trailing in the dirt. Dante and Tiffany jumped out of the car. Tiffany was wearing oversized sunglasses to hide her swollen eyes. She was still wearing the yoga pants and hoodie she had fled the hotel in. "What is this?" Dante screamed, running toward the porch. "Dad, what are you doing here? Why is our stuff on the lawn?" I took a slow sip of tea. The ice cubes clinked against the glass. "It is not your stuff on the lawn, Dante," I corrected him. "It is your garbage." Tiffany marched up the steps. She pulled off her sunglasses. Her eyes were red, but they were blazing with entitlement. "This is illegal," she shrieked. "You can't just throw us out. We live here. We have rights, squatters' rights." I laughed. Squatters' rights. She had been watching too much TV. "Actually, Tiffany," I said, setting my glass down, "you have no rights. You have a revocable license to occupy. A license that I revoked yesterday morning when you tried to glue my wife to a chair." I pulled a document from my pocket. It was the deed to the house. "This house belongs to Elijah Thorne," I said. "Not Dante Thorne. Not Tiffany Thorne. Me. I let you live here rent-free for 3 years because I wanted to help you get on your feet. Instead, you used my charity to mock my family." Dante tried to push past me to the front door. "I need to get inside," he said. "My computer is in there." He grabbed the handle. It didn't turn. He fumbled for his keys. He shoved his key into the lock. It didn't fit. I changed the locks, Dante, I said. 4 hours ago. The locksmith was very efficient. You can't do this, Dante yelled, kicking the door. Where are we supposed to go? I pointed to the boxes on the lawn. I suggest you start loading those boxes into your car, I said. Because I sold the house. Sold it. Dante's jaw dropped. This morning I lied. Well, it wasn't a complete lie. I had called a real estate investor I knew who bought properties for cash. We had a handshake deal. The paperwork would be signed tomorrow. The new owners are moving in tomorrow morning, I continued. They want the property vacant, broom clean, so anything left on this lawn in, I checked my watch, 60 minutes will be hauled away by the junk removal service I hired. They are parked around the corner. Tiffany let out a wail of despair. My ring light, my tripods. It is going to rain. Thunder rumbled in the distance as if on cue. Then start moving, I said. Tiffany ran to the lawn. She started grabbing boxes, trying to shove them into the back seat of the BMW, but the BMW was a sedan. It couldn't hold 3 years of accumulated entitlement. Dante didn't move. He stood on the porch staring at me. Dad, please, he whispered. We have no money. You froze the accounts. We have nowhere to go. I looked at my son. I saw the fear in his eyes, but I also saw the lack of accountability. He still thought this was something I was doing to him, not something he had brought upon himself. You have a wife, Dante, I said. She is very resourceful. She knows how to use glue. Maybe she can build you a shelter. That was a low blow, Dad, he said. Gluing your mother to a chair was a low blow, Dante, I snapped. This is just business. I stood up. I am done talking, I said. You have 45 minutes left. And Dante. He looked up. I called the leasing company for the BMW, I said. Since I stopped the payments, they will be coming to repossess it. Probably by tomorrow. So don't get too comfortable in it. Dante looked at the car. Then he looked at the boxes. Then he looked at me. I hate you, he whispered. I nodded. I know. But unlike you, I don't hate you. I just refuse to enable you anymore. I walked past him down the steps to my own truck parked on the street. I sat in the truck and watched. I watched them scramble. I watched Tiffany screaming at Dante to lift heavier boxes. I watched Dante drop a box of dishes, the sound of shattering china echoing in the quiet neighborhood. And then the rain started. It wasn't a drizzle. It was a summer downpour. Tiffany screamed as the water soaked the cardboard boxes. She tried to cover her designer clothes with a garbage bag. I watched for 10 minutes. Then I started the engine. I didn't feel joy. I felt a heavy, somber relief. The leech had been pulled off. The wound could finally start to heal. But as I drove away, I knew Tiffany wasn't done. She was a content creator, and she had just been handed the ultimate content, a sob story. She was going to weaponize this. She was going to take her eviction and turn it into a crusade. I checked my rearview mirror one last time. They were soaking wet, arguing in the rain, surrounded by their wet possessions. Get ready, Elijah, I told myself. The internet mob is coming. And I was right. By the time I got back to Beatrice, Tiffany had already posted the first video, and it was a masterpiece of manipulation. The rain had stopped by the time we got back to our apartment in the city, but the storm was just beginning. I should have known that a girl like Tiffany would not go quietly into the night. She was a creature of the digital age, and when you take away a narcissist's shelter, they do not build a new one. They try to burn yours down. I was in the kitchen making a pot of chamomile tea for Beatrice. She was sitting in her favorite armchair wrapped in a blanket, staring at the rain-streaked window. She looked small. The events of the wedding had aged her 5 years in 24 hours. Her hip was aching from the stress, and her hands had a slight tremor that hadn't been there before. I brought the tea tray over. Here you go, Bea, I said softly. Drink this. It will help you sleep. She looked up at me with tired eyes. Do you think we were too hard on them, Elijah, she asked. They are homeless. It is raining. I sat down on the ottoman in front of her. We didn't make them homeless, Beatrice, I said. They made themselves homeless when they decided that humiliating you was more important than having a roof over their heads. Just then, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. Then Beatrice's iPad chimed. Then my phone buzzed again, and again. In the span of 10 seconds, our devices lit up like a Christmas tree. I walked over to the counter. I picked up my phone. I had 50 notifications on Facebook. I didn't even use Facebook that much. Most of them were from strangers. I opened the first message. You are a monster. I opened the second. I hope you rot in hell, you toxic old man. I frowned. My heart rate picked up a beat. I opened the YouTube app, and there it was. Trending. The thumbnail showed Tiffany. Her mascara was running down her face, her hair was wet from the rain, she was wrapped in a garbage bag, shivering. The title was in all caps. My husband's family kicked me out on the street because I am white. I felt the blood rush to my ears. I clicked the video. Tiffany was sitting in her car. Dante was in the driver's seat, looking miserable but silent. Tiffany was talking to the camera, her voice thick with staged emotion. "Hey guys," she sobbed, sniffing loudly. "I didn't want to make this video. I really didn't. But I have nowhere else to turn. Today was supposed to be the first day of my honeymoon. Instead, I am homeless." The video then cut to a montage, but it was a masterpiece of manipulation. She had edited the footage from the wedding. She cut out the part where she poured the glue. She cut out the part where she called Beatrice an old hag. She cut out the part where she screamed at the guests. She only kept the part where her dress ripped, the part where I stood on the stage and lectured her, and the part where I told the hotel manager to charge them. "It was just a prank," Tiffany cried in the video. "I accidentally got some glue on my dress. It was a wardrobe malfunction. And instead of helping me, my father-in-law humiliated me in front of everyone. He laughed at me. He called me names." She wiped her nose on her sleeve. "But that is not the worst part, guys. He has always hated me. From the moment Dante brought me home, he made comments. He gave me looks. He is prejudiced." She paused, letting the accusation hang in the air. "I know people think black people can't be racist," she whispered, leaning into the camera. "But Elijah is. He hates that his son married a white woman. He wants to keep his bloodline pure or something. And today he finally found an excuse to throw me out. He locked us out of our house. He threw my stuff in the rain. He left me with nothing." I stared at the screen. My hand was shaking, not from fear but from a rage so cold it burned. I am 74 years old. I marched in Selma. I was bitten by police dogs in Alabama in 1965. I have the scars on my leg to prove it. I spent my entire life fighting for equality, fighting to be seen as a man and not a color. And now this entitled 26-year-old girl who has never suffered a day in her life was using my history as a weapon against me. She was weaponizing her white tears to paint me as a bigot. The video had 2 million views in 3 hours. I looked at the comments. "Cancel this family. Let's find out where he lives. Justice for Tiffany." Then I heard a sound that stopped my heart. It was a gasp, a wet, choking gasp. I turned around. Beatrice was holding her iPad. She had seen it. But she wasn't looking at Tiffany's video. She was looking at her own Instagram account. She had posted a picture of her garden last week, a simple photo of her roses. Now the comments section was a sewer. "Racist old witch. I hope your hip never heals. You deserve to die alone." Beatrice's face was gray. Her mouth was open, but no sound was coming out. Her hand was clutching her chest right over her heart. "B," I shouted, dropping my phone. I ran to her. She looked at me. Her eyes were terrified. "Why do they hate me, Elijah?" she whispered. "I didn't do anything." Then her eyes rolled back in her head. Her body went limp, sliding sideways in the chair. "Beatrice." I caught her before she hit the floor. Her skin was clammy. Her pulse was racing, erratic and weak. I didn't panic. I reverted to my training. I laid her flat on the rug. I loosened her collar. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. "My wife is having a hypertensive crisis," I told the operator. "She has a history of heart trouble. Get here now." The next 10 minutes were a blur of sirens and paramedics. I held Beatrice's hand as they loaded her onto the stretcher. She was conscious, but barely. She kept muttering about the comments, about the hate. I rode in the ambulance with her. I stared at the heart monitor. Beep, beep, beep. Every spike in her blood pressure was a blow from Tiffany. Every irregularity in her rhythm was a consequence of Dante's cowardice. We arrived at the hospital. They rushed her into the ER. I was left standing in the waiting room alone. I sat down on the hard plastic chair. I looked at my hands. They were trembling. I thought about the glue. It was a physical assault. But this video, this mob she had unleashed on my sick wife, this was attempted murder. A doctor came out an hour later. He looked serious. "Mr. Thorne, yes, your wife is stable," the doctor said. "Her blood pressure spiked to dangerous levels. She was on the verge of a stroke. We managed to bring it down, but she is very weak. She needs absolute quiet. No stress, no phones." I nodded. "Thank you, doctor. Can I see her?" Briefly, she is sleeping. I walked into the room. Beatrice looked tiny in the hospital bed. The machines were humming around her, keeping her alive. I kissed her forehead. It was cool. I am sorry, Bea, I whispered. I tried to protect you, but I didn't protect you from the world. I walked out of the room. I closed the door gently. I walked down the hallway to the elevators. I didn't go to the cafeteria. I went to a quiet corner of the lobby. I pulled out my phone. I didn't open YouTube. I didn't open Facebook. I opened my contacts. I scrolled past Dante's name. I would never call that number again. I stopped at a name I hadn't called in 10 years, but I kept it for exactly this kind of day. Harrison Sterling, attorney at law. Harrison wasn't a family lawyer. He wasn't a divorce lawyer. He was a shark. He was the kind of lawyer you hired when you wanted to destroy a corporation or bury an enemy so deep they would need a map to find the sunlight. I dialed. It was 8 p.m. He answered on the second ring. Elijah Thorne. Harrison's voice rasped. It has been a long time. To what do I owe the pleasure? I need you, Harrison, I said. Are you in trouble? No, I said. But someone is about to be. I looked out the window at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Tiffany and Dante were probably celebrating their viral fame. They probably thought they had won. They probably thought that by playing the victim, they could shame me into giving them money. I want to file a lawsuit, Harrison, I said. Okay. Against whom? My daughter-in-law, Tiffany Thorne, and my son, Dante Thorne. Harrison paused. That is unusual, Elijah. What are the damages? I took a deep breath. I want to sue for defamation of character, I said, my voice steady and cold. She posted a video accusing me of racism and abuse. It is a lie. I have proof. That is a good start, Harrison said. Anything else? Yes. I want to sue for intentional infliction of emotional distress. Her actions caused my wife to be hospitalized with a near stroke tonight. We can do that, Harrison said. And Harrison, yes, Elijah, I want to press criminal charges. For the video. No, for the wedding. She poured industrial glue on a chair meant for a disabled woman. That is assault. That is battery. And since Beatrice is over 65 in the state of California, that is elder abuse. I heard the sound of a pen scratching on paper on the other end of the line. Elder abuse. Harrison repeated slowly, tasting the words. That is a felony, Elijah. If we go down that road, she could go to prison. I looked back toward the hallway where my wife lay in a hospital bed hooked up to machines because a narcissistic girl wanted internet clout. I remembered Tiffany's laugh when she poured the glue. I remembered her screaming at Beatrice. I remembered the video where she called me a racist. I remembered Beatrice's face when she read the comments wishing her death. Do it, Harrison, I said. But Elijah, Harrison warned, she is family, or at least she married into it. Once we file these papers, there is no going back. This will destroy her life. She will have a criminal record. She will be unemployable. I gripped the phone tight. She tried to destroy my wife, I said. She tried to destroy my name. She declared war, Harrison. I am just finishing it. I checked my watch. I want the papers filed tomorrow morning, I said. I want them served to her publicly. Find out where they are staying. They are probably in a Motel 6. Harrison chuckled. Find them, I said. And Harrison. Yes. Freeze Dante's trust fund. The one I set up for his 30s. Use the morality clause. He participated in the abuse of his mother. Consider it done. I hung up. I stood there in the hospital lobby feeling a strange sense of calm. Tiffany wanted a reaction. She wanted me to go online and argue with her. She wanted me to look defensive. She didn't know that I don't argue with children. I punish them. She thought she was playing a game of social media checkers. She didn't realize she was sitting across from a grandmaster of legal chess. And I had just moved my queen. I walked back to Beatrice's room. I sat in the chair next to her bed. I held her hand. Sleep well, my love, I whispered. When you wake up, the monsters will be gone. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there watching the heart monitor planning my testimony. Tiffany wanted to be famous. I was going to make her famous, not as a victim, but as the first influencer to go to jail for a prank that went too far. The next morning, the process server would find them, and the video she posted, it would become Exhibit A in her own trial. The hum of a hospital vending machine is a lonely sound at 3 in the morning. I was sitting in the cafeteria of St. Jude's Medical Center with my laptop open on a sticky table. Upstairs, my wife Beatrice was sleeping under the influence of heavy sedatives, trying to recover from a blood pressure spike that nearly killed her. Downstairs, I was doing what I have done for 40 years. I was auditing the books. I needed to know how deep the rot went. I knew Dante and Tiffany were entitled. I knew they were greedy, but I assumed their greed was limited to asking for handouts. I assumed that while they might beg for money, they wouldn't steal it. I was wrong. I logged into the joint account I shared with Beatrice. This was her nest egg. It was a separate savings account we had set up 20 years ago, specifically for her medical needs and her personal comforts in old age. We called it the Sunshine Fund. It was supposed to be untouchable. I scrolled through the transaction history. Most of it was mundane. Pharmacy copays, garden supplies, yarn for her knitting. Then I saw it. A transaction dated 3 weeks ago. 2 days before Beatrice went in for her hip surgery. Transfer out $20,000. Recipient Cinegear Pro Los Angeles. I froze. My finger hovered over the trackpad. $20,000. I opened a new tab and searched for Cinegear Pro. It was a high-end camera equipment store, the kind that sells cinema-grade lenses and lighting rigs for professional studios. I felt a cold, sick feeling in my stomach. Tiffany had been bragging on her Instagram about upgrading her production value. She said she had invested in herself. She said she was taking her career to the next level. She didn't invest in herself. She robbed a sick old woman. My son Dante had power of attorney over that account. We gave it to him 5 years ago just in case something happened to both of us. We trusted him. We thought he would use it to pay our bills if we were incapacitated. Instead, he used it to buy a camera so his wife could film prank videos. He stripped his mother's medical fund to buy the very weapon Tiffany used to humiliate her. I closed the laptop. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the computer. I felt a deadly calm settle over me. It was the calm of a general who realizes that the enemy is not at the gate, but inside the walls. I pulled out my phone. It was 4 in the morning, but the fraud department of my bank operates 24 hours a day. I dialed the number. "Verify identity," the automated voice asked. "Elijah Thorne," I said. I waited for a human agent. "Mr. Thorne, how can I help you today?" "I want to report an unauthorized transaction," I said, my voice flat and hard. "And I want to report elder financial abuse." The agent paused. "Sir, if this involves a family member," I cut him off. "I am reporting a theft. The transaction on June 4th for $20,000 was not authorized by the account holder. The person who made the transfer abused his power of attorney. I want you to flag it as fraud. I want you to freeze the account, and I want you to freeze any accounts linked to the recipient of that transfer. Sir, that would mean freezing your son's personal accounts if he moved the money through there first." "Freeze them," I said. "Freeze everything. I want his credit cards declined. I want his checking account locked. I want him to go to the ATM and find out that he doesn't have a dime to his name." I authorized the freeze. I instructed the bank to prepare a full dossier for the police. I hung up. I walked back up to the 4th floor. I sat in the chair next to Beatrice's bed. I watched her chest rise and fall. She looked so fragile. She had worked as a librarian for 30 years to save that money. She had stood on her feet until they swelled to put that money away, and Dante had taken it with a click of a mouse. I waited. I knew it wouldn't take long. Dante was an addict, not to drugs but to spending. He checked his balance every morning. At 9 a.m., the hospital was waking up. Nurses were changing shifts. Breakfast trays were rattling down the hall. Then I heard it, the sound of heavy boots stomping down the corridor, the sound of a voice I used to love raising and shouting. "Where is she?" the voice screamed. "Where is my mother?" I stood up. I walked out of the room and closed the door gently behind me. I stood guard in the hallway, my back against the wood. Dante came around the corner. He looked wild. His hair was unwashed. He was wearing the same clothes from yesterday. His eyes were bloodshot. He saw me and charged. "You," he spat. "You froze the accounts. I tried to buy coffee and my card was declined. I called the bank and they said there is a fraud investigation." I crossed my arms over my chest. "That is correct, Dante," I said. "There is an investigation." Because $20,000 is missing from your mother's surgery fund. Dante stopped a few feet away from me. He didn't look ashamed. He looked annoyed. Like I was making a big deal out of nothing. It was a loan, Dad, he said, throwing his hands up. Tiffany needed the new lens for the wedding shoot. We were going to pay it back as soon as the monetization check came in next month. A loan, I repeated. Did you ask your mother? Did you ask me? I didn't want to bother you, Dante said, waving his hand dismissively. You guys are old school. You don't understand investment. You leave money sitting in a savings account earning 0.5% interest. It is stupid. I put it to work. He stole from his mother and called it smart business. I stepped forward. You didn't put it to work, Dante. You spent it on a toy, and you did it 2 days before your mother went under the knife. You didn't know if there would be complications. You didn't know if we would need that money for rehabilitation. You stripped her safety net to feed your wife's ego. Dante rolled his eyes. God, you are so dramatic. Look, just sign the waiver. He reached into his back pocket and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper. What is that? I asked. It is a statement for the bank, he said, shoving it toward me. It says that you retroactively authorize the transfer. If you sign this and Mom signs this, they will unlock my accounts. I need access, Dad. I have bills due today. I looked at the paper. Then I looked at the door to Beatrice's room. You want me to wake up your mother? I asked. You want me to wake up the woman who is in this hospital because your wife bullied her into a stroke, and you want me to ask her to sign a paper so you can keep the money you stole from her. Dante huffed. She is not in the hospital because of Tiffany. She is in the hospital because she is old and has high blood pressure. Stop blaming Tiff for everything. Now move. I need Mom to sign this. He tried to step around me. He reached for the door handle. I didn't think. I didn't calculate. I reacted. I grabbed his wrist. My grip was iron. I spent 40 years lifting crates. I might be 74, but I still have the hands of a working man. Don't you touch that door, I growled. Dante tried to yank his arm away. Let go of me, old man. You are crazy. You are sabotaging my life. I am saving your mother's life, I said. Dante sneered. He looked right into my eyes and said the words that broke the last thread of connection between us. She doesn't even know what is going on. She is senile half the time anyway. She won't miss the money. She is going to die soon anyway. Why does she need 20 grand? The hallway went silent. The nurses at the station stopped typing. The air pressure seemed to drop. My hand moved before my brain could process the insult. It wasn't a punch. A punch is for a fight between equals. It was a slap. An open-handed, backhanded slap that carried the weight of 32 years of wasted fatherhood. Crack. The sound echoed down the sterile corridor like a gunshot. My hand connected with Dante's cheek with a force that spun him around. He stumbled back, crashing into a cart full of linens. He held his face, looking at me with shock. His cheek was already turning bright red. You hit me, he whispered. You actually hit me. I stood over him, breathing hard. My hand was stinging, but it felt clean. You are not my son, I said, my voice shaking with rage. The boy I raised would never wish death on his mother. The boy I raised would never steal from the sick. You are a stranger, a parasite. I pointed a trembling finger at the elevator. Get out, I ordered. Dante stood up slowly. He looked around. He saw the nurses watching. He saw the security guard approaching. You will regret this, he hissed, clutching his face. You will die alone, and when you do, I will piss on your grave. He turned and walked away. I watched him go. I watched the elevator doors close on his back. The security guard walked up to me. Sir, is everything okay? He asked, eyeing me warily. I straightened my jacket. I smoothed my tie. Everything is fine, officer, I said, just taking out the trash. I turned back to the door. I put my hand on the handle. I took a deep breath, composing myself. I couldn't let Beatrice see me like this. I couldn't let her know that I had just struck our son. I walked into the room. Beatrice was awake. Her eyes were open, looking at me. Was that Dante? She asked weakly. I heard shouting. I sat down and took her hand. I kissed her knuckles. No, my love, I lied. It wasn't Dante. It was just a problem with the insurance. But don't worry. I handled it. Did you fix it? She asked. Yes, B, I said, feeling the tears prick my eyes. I fixed it. It is over now. She closed her eyes and drifted back to sleep. I sat there in the silence, holding the hand of the only person in the world who mattered. Dante was gone. His accounts were frozen. The police were building a file, but the war wasn't over. I knew Dante. He was a coward, but a desperate coward is dangerous. He wouldn't come back with a waiver, he would come back with a lawyer. Or worse, he would try to find something else to sell, but he would find nothing. Because while he was busy nursing his bruised cheek, I was busy calling the locksmith for the warehouse where I kept the vintage car collection he thought he was going to inherit. If he wanted to wait for us to die, he was going to have a very long, very poor wait. But first I had to deal with the woman who pulled the strings. Tiffany. I had cut off the supply. Now it was time to cut off the head of the snake. And my private investigator had just sent me a file that was going to make the glue prank look like child's play. It turns out Tiffany had a secret named Brad, and Brad was about to become my favorite person in the world. The rain had finally stopped, but the air in my study felt heavy and damp. It was midnight. Beatrice was safe in the hospital, sedated and sleeping, but I was wide awake. I was sitting at my mahogany desk, the only light coming from a green banker's lamp that cast long shadows across the room. I was waiting for a man named Malone. Malone was a private investigator I had used for 30 years in the logistics business. When cargo went missing or when a warehouse foreman started driving a car he couldn't afford, I called Malone. He was a man who didn't exist on social media. He didn't have a website. He operated in the gray areas where the truth usually hides. I heard the gravel crunch in the driveway. A minute later, the heavy oak door to my study creaked open. Malone walked in. He was soaking wet, shaking off a trench coat that looked like it had seen better decades. He didn't say hello. He just walked to my desk and dropped a thick manila envelope onto the blotter. The sound it made was heavy. It was the sound of a life being dismantled. "You are not going to like this," Elijah Malone said, his voice raspy from too many cigarettes. "It is worse than we thought." I poured him a glass of scotch. I poured one for myself. "Tell me," I said. Malone took a sip and pointed at the envelope. "Your daughter-in-law is not who she says she is," he said. "In fact, she is not even your daughter-in-law." I frowned. "What do you mean?" "Open it." I undid the string on the envelope. I slid the contents out. The first thing I saw was a stack of photographs. They were grainy, taken with a telephoto lens, but the subject was unmistakable. It was Tiffany. But it wasn't the Tiffany I knew. It wasn't the polished influencer with the ring light and the filters. These photos were taken inside a casino. The timestamp was 6 months ago. Tiffany was sitting at a blackjack table. Her hair was messy. She was smoking a cigarette, holding it with a desperation I had never seen. There were bags under her eyes. "Look at the chips," Malone said. I looked closer. There were stacks of black chips. Thousands of dollars. "Now look at the next photo," Malone said. I flipped to the next one. It showed Tiffany arguing with a man in the casino lobby. The man was large, bald, and wearing a suit that cost more than my car. He was gripping her arm. She looked terrified. "That is," Vinny Santoro Malone explained. "He runs a private lending operation out of Las Vegas. And by private, I mean illegal. He lends money to desperate gamblers at 50% interest." I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "How much does she owe?" I asked. $50,000, Malone said. "Principal. With interest, she is looking at 75. And Santoro isn't the kind of man who sends overdue notices. He sends guys with baseball bats." I sat back in my chair. The puzzle pieces were slamming into place. The theft, the $20,000 she stole from Beatrice's medical fund. It wasn't for a camera lens. It wasn't for her career. It was protection money. She was trying to buy time. She was trying to keep her kneecaps intact. "She is drowning," Elijah Malone said. "She has maxed out every credit card she has. She has taken out payday loans in 3 different states. She is being hunted." I looked at the photo of her terrified face. For a split second, I almost felt pity. But then I remembered the glue. I remembered her laughing as she poured it on Beatrice's chair. "She didn't marry Dante for love," I whispered. "No," Malone said. "She married him for the payload. She needed a mark. She needed someone with a clean credit score and a wealthy father. She wasn't looking for a husband, Elijah. She was looking for a host. A parasite needs a host to survive." "But that is not the bombshell," Malone said. "Keep digging." I reached back into the envelope. My hand brushed against a piece of paper that felt official. It had a raised seal. I pulled it out. It was a marriage certificate, issued by the state of Nevada, Clark County. The date was 2 years ago. The bride was Tiffany Miller. That was her maiden name. The groom was a man named Brad Kowalski. I looked up at Malone. "Did they get divorced?" I asked. Malone shook his head. He pulled out a second document. A background check on Brad Kowalski. "No divorce filing," Malone said. "No annulment. Nothing. As far as the state of Nevada is concerned, Tiffany Miller is still legally married to Brad Kowalski." I stared at the paper. Bigamy. My son's marriage was a sham. It was void. It was illegal. The wedding in Napa Valley, the vows, the priest, it was all theater. It had no legal standing. "Who is Brad Kowalski?" I asked. Malone slid a mugshot across the desk. The man in the photo looked like he chewed gravel for breakfast. He had a scar running down his cheek and tattoos covering his neck. "Brad is a bouncer at a strip club in downtown Vegas," Malone said. "He is also a semi-professional arm wrestler, not exactly the influencer type." "Why did she leave him?" I asked. "He went to jail for 6 months for assault," Malone said. While he was inside, Tiffany grabbed his stash of cash, about 10 grand, and ran to Chicago. She reinvented herself. She dyed her hair, started the TikTok channel, and went hunting for a soft target. She found Dante. "Does Brad know where she is?" Malone smiled. It was a cold, professional smile. "He didn't," Malone said. "Until about 3 hours ago." "What did you do, Malone?" "I made a phone call," Malone said casually. "I tracked Brad down. He is out of jail. He is working security at a dive bar. I told him that his loving wife is currently in Chicago living the high life. I told him she just got married to a rich kid. And I told him she has $50,000 of debt that she is trying to pin on her new family." "And what did Brad say?" "He said he misses his wife," Malone said. "He said he would love to come to Chicago and catch up, especially since she still owes him that 10 grand she stole." I looked at the documents on my desk. This was it. This was the nuclear option. Tiffany wasn't just a mean girl. She was a felon. She was a bigamist. She was a thief on the run from the mob. And she had dragged my foolish, weak son right into the middle of it. Dante didn't know. I was sure of it. He was stupid, but he wasn't criminal. He thought he had married a princess. He didn't know he had married a fugitive. I gathered the papers. "Malone," I said, "I want you to get Brad Kowalski a plane ticket." "First class?" Malone asked, grinning. "Bus," I said. "He looks like a man who appreciates the scenic route, but get him here by tomorrow night." I pulled out my checkbook. I wrote Malone a check for $10,000. "Thank you," I said. Malone took the check. "What are you going to do, Elijah?" he asked. I stood up and walked to the window. The rain was starting again. "I am going to have dinner with my family," I said. "I am going to invite Dante and Tiffany to a nice restaurant. I am going to pretend to surrender." "You are going to bait the trap," Malone said. "Yes," I said. "Tiffany wants money. She is desperate for it. If I dangle a check in front of her, she will walk right into the lion's den." "And Brad. Brad is the dessert," I said. Malone tipped his hat and walked out into the night. I stood alone in my study. I looked at the marriage certificate again. Tiffany Miller and Brad Kowalski. I thought about Dante, my poor stupid son. He had burned his bridges with me for a woman who wasn't even his wife. He had slapped his father and insulted his mother for a criminal who was using him as a human shield against loan sharks. It was tragic. But it was also the leverage I needed to save him. Dante wouldn't listen to reason. He wouldn't listen to morality. But maybe, just maybe, he would listen to the reality of a 300-pound bouncer claiming his wife. I picked up my phone. I dialed Dante's number. It went to voicemail. "You have reached Dante. Leave a message." "Dante." I said, my voice soft and broken. "It is Dad. Listen, I have been thinking. Maybe I was too harsh. Your mother is sick and life is too short for this fighting. I want to talk. I want to help you guys out. Meet me tomorrow night at the Drake Hotel. Dinner is on me. And bring Tiffany. We need to discuss the settlement." I hung up. I knew they would come. They had no money. They had no home. And now I knew they had sharks circling them. They would crawl over broken glass for a check. Little did they know that the check I was going to write would bounce louder than Tiffany did when the chair ripped off her dress. I turned off the green lamp. The darkness of the room felt comforting. The game was set. The players were moving. And tomorrow night the king would checkmate the queen, and the board would be cleared for good. The Coke door at the Drake Hotel is the kind of restaurant where deals are made in whispers and the lighting is low enough to hide a multitude of sins. It smells of aged mahogany leather and money that has been in the family for 3 generations. I arrived 30 minutes early. I selected a booth in the corner, far away from the entrance, but with a clear line of sight to the door. I wanted to see them coming. I wanted to see the desperation before they had a chance to put on their masks. I ordered a bottle of sparkling water and sat there waiting. I felt like a fisherman who has just chummed the water with blood and is waiting for the sharks to circle. My private investigator Malone had done his job perfectly. The trap was set. The players were moving into position. Now all I had to do was play the part of the defeated old man, the father who had realized his mistake, the soft touch. At 7:15 precisely, the hostess led them to my table. They looked terrible. Dante was wearing a suit, but it was wrinkled as if he had slept in it. His tie was loose, and there were dark circles under his eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. He looked thinner. The stress of having his credit cards declined for 48 hours was clearly eating him alive. Tiffany looked even worse. She was wearing a trench coat buttoned all the way up, probably to hide the fact that her wardrobe had been decimated by the rainstorm yesterday. She had piled on the makeup trying to cover the blotchy skin from crying, but under the harsh lights of the restaurant she just looked cracked, like a porcelain doll that had been dropped on the floor and glued back together by a drunk. They slid into the booth opposite me. They didn't say hello. They didn't smile. They looked at me with a mixture of hostility and hunger. "Hello, Dante," I said softly. "Hello, Tiffany. Thank you for coming." Dante reached for this bread basket, immediately tearing off a chunk of sourdough and shoving it into his mouth. He ate like a starving animal. "We almost didn't come," Dante mumbled through a mouthful of bread. "We have offers, you know. A tabloid offered us $5,000 for an exclusive interview about how you abused us." $5,000, Tiffany corrected him, her voice sharp. $10,000. We have options, Elijah. The internet is on our side. People are starting a GoFundMe for me. They feel sorry for the girl who got kicked out by her racist father-in-law. I watched her carefully. She was bluffing. If she had $10,000 from a tabloid, she wouldn't be here. She wouldn't be wearing yesterday's makeup. And she certainly wouldn't be staring at the menu prices with that look of panic in her eyes. I know I said keeping my voice low and humble. I saw the video, Tiffany. It was very effective. Tiffany smirked. She sat up a little straighter. She thought she had won. She thought I was scared of her TikTok army. "It is called speaking my truth, Elijah," she said. "You can't silence victims anymore. The world is watching." She placed her handbag on the table. It was a large designer bag, probably one of the few things she managed to save from the lawn. She positioned it carefully right next to her water glass. I saw the lens of her phone poking out from the side pocket. The tiny red recording light was blinking. She was live streaming, or at least recording for later. She wanted to catch me begging. She wanted to catch me admitting guilt so she could post it and destroy me completely. Good, I thought. Record this. Record every second. It will make the ending so much sweeter. I ignored the phone. I looked at the menu. "Order whatever you want," I said. "It is on me." Dante didn't hesitate. "I will have the ribeye," he told the waiter. "The 20-ounce bone-in, medium rare, and a side of lobster mac and cheese. And bring another basket of bread." Tiffany ordered the sea bass and a glass of the most expensive Chardonnay on the list. When the waiter left, the silence at the table was thick enough to cut with a knife. "So," Tiffany said, taking a long sip of her wine. "Why are we here, Elijah? Did your lawyer tell you to settle? Did you realize that you are about to lose everything if we sue you?" I sighed. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. I made my hands shake just a little. "I am tired, Tiffany," I said. "I am 74 years old. Beatrice is in the hospital. The house is quiet. I spent all night thinking about what happened, about the wedding, about the house," and Tiffany prompted, leaning forward. "And I realized that I failed you," I said. Dante stopped chewing. He looked at me, his eyes wide. "You failed us?" he asked. "Yes, son. I was too harsh. I let my temper get the best of me. You are young. You make mistakes. That prank, it was cruel, yes. But kicking you out on the street, freezing your accounts, that was excessive. A father should protect his children, not punish them." Tiffany kicked Dante under the table. I saw her do it. She was signaling him. "We got him." She softened her face, trying to look like the benevolent victim. "It takes a big man to admit he is wrong, Elijah," she said, her voice dripping with fake sweetness. "We were hurt. Deeply hurt. I mean, I have trauma from that chair. I have nightmares about the glue, and then the rain. It destroyed my equipment, my livelihood." "I know," I said, nodding. "I know, and I want to make it right." "How?" Tiffany asked. Her eyes narrowed. She didn't want an apology. She wanted cash. I reached into my inner jacket pocket. I pulled out my checkbook. It was a long, leather-bound book, the kind used for business accounts. I placed it on the table. "I want to offer you a settlement," I said. "A fresh start." Tiffany's eyes locked onto the checkbook like a laser. She licked her lips. "We are listening," she said. I opened the book. I uncapped my fountain pen. "I know you have debts," I said. "I know life is expensive, and I know you want to build a future. So, I am prepared to give you a lump sum. Today. Right now. On one condition." "What condition?" Dante asked, suspicious. "That you sign a document stating that we are square," I said. "That you stop the videos. That you leave Beatrice alone. And that you take this money and go away. Move to a new city. Start over." Tiffany laughed. "You want to buy us off." "I want to help you," I corrected. "How much?" she asked. I looked her in the eye. $100,000, I said. Dante choked on his water. 100 grand, he sputtered. Tiffany didn't choke. She stopped breathing for a second. I saw the calculation running behind her eyes. $100,000. That would pay off Vinny Santoro. That would pay off her gambling debts. That would leave her with enough to buy a new wardrobe and maybe rent a penthouse for a few months. It was her lifeline. "Is that enough?" I asked. Tiffany tried to look unimpressed, but her hand was trembling as she reached for her wine glass. "It is a start," she said. "Considering the emotional damage, maybe 150 would be fairer." I closed the checkbook. "Okay," I said. "If 100 isn't enough, then maybe we should let the lawyers handle it. It will take years, of course. The courts are backed up. But if you want to wait—" "No," Dante shouted. "No, Dad. 100 is fine. It is great. Tiff, take it. We need it." Tiffany glared at him, but she knew he was right. They couldn't wait years. They couldn't wait days. She had sharks circling. "Fine," she said quickly. 100,000. Write it." I opened the book again. I wrote the date slowly. I wrote Dante and Tiffany Thorne on the payee line. I wrote out the amount. $100,000 and 00 over 100. I signed my name at the bottom. Elijah Thorne. The scratching of the pen on the paper was loud in the quiet booth. I tore the check out. The sound was sharp. Rip. It sounded just like her dress tearing. I held the check in my hand. I didn't hand it over yet. "This is a lot of money," I said, looking at the slip of paper. "It is enough to fix a lot of mistakes." "Give it to me, Elijah," Tiffany said, extending her hand. Her fingernails were chipped, but she reached out with the greed of a starving wolf. I placed the check on the white tablecloth in the center of the table. It sat there blue and crisp, a ticket to freedom, or so they thought. Tiffany reached for it. Her fingers brushed the paper. Her eyes were bright with triumph. She was already spending it in her head. She was thinking about the shopping spree. She was thinking about how easy it was to manipulate the old man. She grabbed the check. She held it up to the light. "You did the right thing, Elijah," she said, smiling a cold, victorious smile. "You finally learned your place." I smiled back. "Yes, Tiffany," I said. "I learned exactly where my place is." She folded the check and made a move to put it in her purse next to the recording phone. But before she could put it away, I cleared my throat. "There is just one small thing," I said. Tiffany paused. "What?" "I didn't bring the agreement for you to sign," I said. "But I did bring a witness, someone to verify the transaction." "A witness?" she asked, confused. "We don't need a witness. Dante is here." "No," I said, leaning back in the booth. "Not Dante. Someone who has a vested interest in your financial situation." I looked past her shoulder toward the entrance of the restaurant. "I think he is here now," I said. Tiffany turned around. Dante looked up from his steak. Walking across the dining room floor was a mountain of a man. He was 6'5", wearing a leather jacket that strained against his muscles. He had a scar running down his cheek and tattoos climbing up his neck. He looked completely out of place in the elegant hotel, but he walked with the confidence of a man who breaks things for a living. He was looking straight at our booth. He was looking straight at Tiffany. Tiffany's face went white. The check slipped from her fingers and fluttered onto the table. "Brad," she whispered. Dante looked at her. "Who is Brad?" The man arrived at the table. He stood there blocking the light, casting a long shadow over the feast. He looked down at Tiffany. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Hello, babe," he rumbled, his voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "Long time no see." I heard you got married again. Which is funny because I don't remember signing any divorce papers. Dante dropped his fork. It clattered loudly against the china plate. Tiffany couldn't speak. She was paralyzed. I picked up the check from the table. I held it between my fingers. "Hello, Mr. Kowalski," I said pleasantly. "I believe this belongs to you." I looked at Tiffany. The light in her eyes had gone out. The greed was replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. The trap had snapped shut, and the teeth were very, very sharp. The check for $100,000 lay on the crisp white tablecloth like a beacon of hope in a storm. I watched Tiffany's hand creep toward it. Her fingers were trembling. The chipped polish on her nails was a testament to how far she had fallen in just 48 hours. She looked at that piece of paper with a hunger that was almost obscene. To her, it wasn't just money. It was vindication. It was proof that she had won. It was proof that the old man had folded. She reached out. Her fingertips brushed the edge of the blue paper. I didn't blink. I moved my hand with the speed of a man who had caught fly balls in the outfield 50 years ago. I slammed my palm down on top of the check. "Not so fast, Tiffany," I said, my voice dropping an octave. She flinched, pulling her hand back as if I had burned her. "What are you doing, Elijah?" She snapped, her eyes darting between my face and the check trapped under my hand. "We had a deal. You said 100,000. I did say that," I replied calmly, "and I fully intend to honor the financial transaction. But you see, Tiffany, in the world of logistics, we have a rule. You never sign the bill of lading until you inspect the cargo. And I have discovered that the cargo you brought into my family is counterfeit." Dante looked up from his steak, his mouth full. "What are you talking about, Dad? Just give her the money so we can leave." I ignored him. I kept my eyes locked on Tiffany. "I told you I brought a witness," I said. I looked over Tiffany's shoulder. Brad Kowalski was standing right behind her. He was a terrifying figure. He took up so much space that the air around our booth seemed to thin out. He was wearing a leather jacket that creaked when he moved, and his neck was a canvas of ink. A spiderweb tattoo stretched up behind his ear. He smelled of stale tobacco and cheap musk. He placed two massive hands on the back of the booth, trapping Tiffany in her seat. Tiffany felt his presence before she saw him. She stiffened. Her eyes went wide. She slowly turned her head. When she saw his face, the color drained from her skin so fast I thought she was going to faint. It wasn't just fear. It was the recognition of a ghost she thought she had buried. "Hello, wifey." Brad rumbled, his voice sounding like gravel grinding in a cement mixer. Tiffany's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Brad leaned down close to her ear. "I heard you got married again," he whispered loud enough for Dante to hear. I have to admit, I was a little hurt. I checked the mailbox every day, but my invitation never came, which is strange considering I am still your husband. Dante dropped his fork. It clattered loudly onto his plate, splashing gravy onto the table. Husband Dante stammered, looking at Brad and then at Tiffany. "Who is this guy, Tiff? What is he talking about?" Tiffany finally found her voice. It was a high-pitched squeak. "He is nobody," she lied, her eyes darting around the room looking for an exit. "He is just a crazy ex-boyfriend. He is stalking me. Dante, call the police." Brad laughed. It was a deep, dark sound that made the couple at the next table stop eating. "Ex-boyfriend," Brad mocked. "That is not what it says on the certificate in Vegas, baby. Remember the little white chapel? Remember the Elvis impersonator? You wore pink. I wore my good vest. We promised till death do us part. And I checked the records this morning. Neither of us is dead yet." He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He tossed it onto the table next to my hand. It was a copy of the marriage license. Tiffany Miller and Brad Kowalski. Dante picked it up. His hands were shaking so hard he could barely hold the paper still. He read it. He read the date. 2 years ago. This is real," he whispered. "You are married." Tiffany scrambled. She realized the narrative was slipping away from her. She grabbed her handbag. She realized her phone was still recording. The little red light was blinking, capturing her exposure in real time. She lunged for the phone. She tapped the screen frantically, trying to kill the live stream, trying to delete the footage. No, no, no," she muttered. "This can't be happening." I lifted my hand off the check. I picked up the check. I folded it neatly. "You can stop recording, Tiffany," I said. "The show is over. But don't worry about the audience. I am sure your followers will love the plot twist. The grieving bride is actually a fugitive bigamist." Tiffany slammed her phone face down on the table. She looked at me with pure hatred. "You set me up," she hissed. "You brought him here." I nodded slowly. "I did. Because I needed Dante to see the truth. Not the truth according to you, but the legal truth. I looked at my son. He was staring at this marriage license like it was a death warrant. Dante. I said, my voice soft but firm. Look at me. He looked up. His eyes were wet. You are not married, son, I said. The wedding in Napa, the vows, the certificate you signed, it is all void. It is legally null. You cannot marry a woman who is already married. Dante looked at Tiffany. Is it true, he asked. Tiffany didn't answer. She was staring at Brad, terrified of what he might do. It is true, Dante, I continued. You are not a husband. You are a victim of fraud. And right now you are technically aiding and abetting a criminal. Criminal, Dante whispered. Bigamy is a felony, I explained. But that is the least of her problems. I turned to Brad. Mr. Kowalski, I believe there is also the matter of some financial discrepancies between you and your wife. Brad nodded, cracking his knuckles. Yeah, he said. 10 grand. She cleaned out my stash while I was doing time for assault, took every dime I had saved. He looked at Tiffany. His eyes were cold. I want my money, Tiff, plus interest. Let's call it 20. Tiffany shrank back against the leather booth. I don't have it, she whimpered. I spent it. Brad leaned in closer. Well, then it looks like you are going to have to work it off. Or maybe your new daddy here will pay it. He looked at me, eyeing the check in my hand. I smiled pleasantly. Oh, I am not paying her debts, I said. That check isn't for her. I held up the check for $100,000. I looked at Tiffany. You thought this was hush money, didn't you? I asked. You thought I was paying you to go away. Tiffany nodded, mute. I ripped the check in half. Rip! Then I ripped it again and again, until it was just blue confetti. I dropped the pieces onto her empty plate. I don't pay terrorists, Tiffany, I said. And I don't pay liars. I turned to Dante. Dante, get up. He blinked, confused. What? Get up, I ordered. Walk away from this table. Walk away from her. Right now. Dante looked at Tiffany. She grabbed his arm. Dante, don't leave me, she begged, tears streaming down her face. He is going to hurt me. Please. I love you. I looked at Dante. She doesn't love you, son, I said. She loves the safety you provide. She loves the money she thought you had. But look at her. Look at the man standing behind her. That is her reality. That is the world she dragged you into. Do you want to be part of that? Do you want to go to prison for a woman who has another husband? Dante looked at Brad. Brad smiled, showing a gold tooth. Sit down, little man, Brad said to Dante. We have family business to discuss. Dante looked at me. He saw the exit. He saw the path back to sanity. He stood up. He shook Tiffany's hand off his arm. Dante, no, she screamed. I am sorry, Tiff, Dante whispered. But you are married. He stepped out of the booth. He walked over to stand behind me. He looked small. He looked broken. But he was safe. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I looked at Tiffany one last time. She was trapped in the corner of the booth. Brad was blocking her exit. She looked small and pathetic, stripped of her lies. You have a lot to talk about with your husband, I said. I will leave you to it. Wait, Tiffany screamed. You can't leave me here. He is going to kill me. Elijah, please, call the police. I paused. The police, I asked. Yes, she cried. Help me. I checked my watch. Well, that is funny, I said, because I believe the police are already on their way. Tiffany's eyes lit up with hope. They are, I said. But not to save you, Tiffany. I pointed to the front entrance of the restaurant. 2 uniformed officers and a detective in a cheap suit were walking through the doors. They scanned the room. I raised my hand. The detective saw me and nodded. They are here to arrest you, I said. Arrest me, she gasped. For bigamy, I said, ticking off the counts on my fingers. For fraud. For the theft of $20,000 from my wife's medical fund. And for the assault you committed at the wedding. I leaned in close. You wanted a viral moment, I whispered. Being arrested in the middle of the Drake Hotel while your secret husband watches, that is going to be viral. The officers approached the table. Tiffany Thorne, the detective said, or should I say, Tiffany Kowalski. Tiffany looked at Brad. She looked at the cops. She looked at me. She realized it was over. The house of cards hadn't just fallen. It had been incinerated. She slumped in the seat, defeated. I turned to Brad. Mr. Kowalski, I said, the police will take it from here, but I suggest you talk to the detective about the money she stole from you. You might be able to get restitution from the state." Brad tipped his imaginary hat. "Thanks, Pops. I appreciate the plane ticket." I turned to Dante. He was staring at the floor, crying silently. "Let's go, son," I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. We walked out of the restaurant. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. I heard the sound of handcuffs clicking. I heard Tiffany reading her rights. It was the most beautiful sound in the world. But the night wasn't over. Dante was safe physically, but mentally, he was a wreck. He had just watched his entire life dissolve. I had to get him home. Not to his home. To mine. Because even though he had failed me, he was still my blood. And in logistics, when cargo is damaged, you don't throw it away. You bring it back to the warehouse for repairs. But first I had to make sure he understood one thing. The ride was over. The bank of Dad was closed. If he wanted to eat tomorrow, he was going to have to work for it. And I knew exactly where he could start. The air in the Coq d'Or restaurant changed the moment the officers crossed the threshold. It wasn't the violent shift of a bar fight, but the heavy, suffocating pressure of the law descending on a room full of lies. I watched them approach. There were 2 uniformed officers flanking a detective who looked like he had seen every scam Chicago had to offer. He wore a cheap gray suit and an expression of utter boredom. To him, this was just another Tuesday. To Tiffany, it was the end of the world. Tiffany was still pressed into the corner of the booth, trapped by the bulk of her legal husband, Brad. She saw the police, and for a second a flash of relief crossed her face. She actually thought they were there to save her from the biker. She thought she could bat her eyelashes, cry a few tears, and convince them that she was a damsel in distress being threatened by 2 mean men. She straightened her trench coat, trying to regain some of the influencer composure she had lost. She touched her hair. She prepared her performance. But the detective didn't look at Brad. He didn't look at me. His eyes were locked onto her like a heat-seeking missile. He stopped at the edge of the table. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket pocket. "Tiffany Miller," he said. Tiffany flinched at the use of her maiden name. "It is Thorne," she corrected him automatically, her voice trembling. "Mrs. Tiffany Thorne." The detective didn't blink. "According to the state of Nevada and the National Crime Information Center, you are Tiffany Miller Kowalski, and I have a warrant here for your arrest." Tiffany laughed. It was a high-pitched, hysterical sound that made the diners at the nearby tables turn and stare. "Arrest," she said, looking at Dante for support. "That is ridiculous." "For what?" "A prank video. My father-in-law is just overreacting, officer. This is a civil dispute." The detective leaned down. He placed his hands on the table, leaning into her personal space. "This isn't about a video, ma'am. We have a warrant from the Financial Crimes Division. You are charged with identity theft, insurance fraud, bigamy, and grand larceny, specifically the theft of $20,000 from the accounts of a vulnerable senior citizen, Beatrice Thorne." And succeed. The color drained from Tiffany's face so completely that her makeup stood out like a mask. "Grand larceny," she whispered. "You also have outstanding warrants in Las Vegas for check kiting," the detective added. "You have had a busy few years, Mrs. Kowalski." He motioned to the uniformed officers. "Get her up." The officers moved in. Brad Kowalski stepped aside with a mock bow, gesturing for the officers to take his wife. "Please be gentle with her, boys," Brad rumbled with a cruel grin. "She is fragile. She bruises like a peach." The female officer didn't look like she cared about bruising. She grabbed Tiffany's arm and hauled her out of the booth. Tiffany stumbled, her high heels slipping on the polished floor. "No, wait," Tiffany screamed, trying to pull away. "You can't do this. I am pregnant." I raised an eyebrow. That was a new lie. "You weren't pregnant when you were drinking wine 10 minutes ago, Tiffany," I said calmly from my seat. She glared at me. "Shut up, old man," she shrieked. "You did this." "You called them." "Yes, I did," I replied, taking a sip of my water. "I told you, Tiffany, I protect my investments, and my wife is my most valuable asset. You stole from her. You hurt her. Now you pay." The officer spun Tiffany around. She pulled Tiffany's wrists behind her back. Click, click. The sound of handcuffs ratcheting shut is a very specific mechanical noise. It is the sound of finality. It cuts through the noise of a restaurant clatter like a gavel striking a desk. Tiffany looked down at her wrists. She looked at the steel cuffs pinching her skin. She was wearing a Burberry trench coat that she had bought with my money. She was carrying a Louis Vuitton bag that she had bought with stolen funds. And now she was wearing state-issued steel bracelets. The contrast was striking. The influencer facade had crumbled, revealing the grifter underneath. Dante finally snapped out of his shock. He stood up, his face flushed with a mix of embarrassment and panic. "Hey, wait a minute," he shouted, stepping toward the detective. "You can't just take her. Do you know who I am? My father knows the mayor. You need to let her go right now. This is a misunderstanding. We will clear it up in the morning." The detective turned to look at Dante. He looked him up and down, taking in the rumpled suit, the desperate eyes, the smell of fear. "Sir, step back," the detective said calmly. "I am her husband," Dante yelled, poking the detective in the chest. "I demand you release her." The detective caught Dante's finger. He didn't twist it, but he held it firm. The room went silent. "You are not her husband, son," the detective said, his voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "The big guy over there is her husband. You are just the mark." Dante pulled his hand back, nursing it. "But I love her," he whimpered. "I won't let you take her." He tried to grab Tiffany's arm to pull her away from the officer. It was a weak, pathetic attempt at heroism. The detective stepped in front of Dante. He put a hand on his gun belt, not drawing it, just reminding Dante it was there. "Listen to me very carefully," the detective said. "I have a file on you too, Mr. Thorne. I know you gave her access to the accounts. I know you signed the checks. Right now, the district attorney is looking at you as a victim of manipulation. But if you interfere with this arrest, if you touch my officer one more time, you graduate from victim to accomplice." He leaned in close to Dante's face. "Do you want to go downtown with her?" the detective asked. "Do you want to be charged with conspiracy to commit fraud? Because if you keep talking, I will cuff you right here and put you in the same car. Is that what you want?" Dante froze. He looked at Tiffany. She was crying now, begging him with her eyes. "Save me, Dante. Do something." Then he looked at the detective. He looked at the gun. He looked at the handcuffs. And the cowardice that had defined his entire life took over. He stepped back. He put his hands up. "No," Dante whispered. "No, I don't want to go to jail." Tiffany let out a wail of betrayal. "You coward," she screamed. "You spineless little worm. I hate you." The officers began to drag her toward the exit. She fought them, kicking her legs, screaming obscenities that would make a sailor blush. Every head in the restaurant was turned. People were holding up their phones, recording the spectacle. Tiffany finally got her viral moment. She was going to be all over the internet by morning. #influencer arrested. I watched her go. I watched the door swing shut behind her, cutting off her screams. Brad Kowalski chuckled. "Well, that was entertaining," he said. "I guess I will head back to Vegas. Thanks for the dinner, Pops." He grabbed a handful of bread from the basket, winked at me, and walked out, leaving me alone with my son. Dante stood in the middle of the restaurant, staring at the door where his fake wife had just disappeared. He looked like a child who had lost his mother in a supermarket. He turned slowly to face me. I was still sitting in the booth, calm, composed. Dante looked at me. He saw the face of the man who had paid his bills for 32 years. The man who had bailed him out of every scrape. The man who had given him a house, a car, a life. He walked over to the table. His legs were shaking. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't answer. I just looked at him. "Dad, please," he said, his voice cracking. "You have to help me. You have to call the lawyer. You have to get her out." "She is pregnant, Dad." "She said she is pregnant." "She is lying, Dante," I said, cold as ice, just like she lied about the glue, just like she lied about her name, just like she lied about loving you. Dante's face crumpled. The reality was crashing down on him, the police file, the fraud, the frozen accounts. He realized he was standing on the edge of a cliff, and I was the only one with a rope. He did something he had never done before. He collapsed. He fell to his knees right there on the dirty floor of the restaurant. He grabbed the hem of my jacket. He buried his face in the fabric, sobbing. "Dad, please," he cried loud enough for the whole room to hear. "I am sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know about the money. Don't let them arrest me, Dad. I can't go to jail. I will die in there. Please save me. Fix it. You always fix it." I looked down at the top of his head. I felt the wetness of his tears on my hand. For 30 years I had fixed it. When he broke a window, I paid for it. When he failed a class, I hired a tutor. When he crashed his car, I bought a new one. I had loved him so much I had crippled him. I had turned him into this weeping, kneeling man-child who thought tears were a currency. I felt a pang of heartbreak so sharp it almost took my breath away. This was my son, my blood. But I looked at his hands clutching my jacket. The same hands that had held the camera while his wife tortured his mother. The same hands that had signed the transfer stealing Beatrice's surgery money. I couldn't fix this. If I fixed this, I would be killing him. I would be confirming that he never had to take responsibility for anything. I reached down. I uncurled his fingers from my jacket one by one. Dante looked up at me, his eyes red and swollen, confusion written all over his face. "Dad," he whispered. "Stand up, Dante," I said, my voice quiet but carrying the weight of finality. He didn't move. "Stand up," I commanded. He slowly pulled himself up, using the table for support. He stood there swaying slightly. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I placed a $100 bill on the table for the waiter who had watched the whole scene with wide eyes. "I am not going to save you, Dante," I said. Dante's mouth fell open. "What?" "I am not calling the lawyer," I said. "I am not paying her bail, and I am not paying yours if they come for you." "But I am your son," he pleaded. "Yes," I said. "You are. And that is why I am letting you fall. You need to learn that actions have consequences, son. Real consequences. Not the kind I can write a check to make disappear." I stepped out of the booth. "You are homeless, Dante. You are broke. You are under investigation. And the woman you destroyed your family for is in a cell." I looked him in the eye. "Figure it out." I turned and walked away. "Dad, wait!" Dante screamed behind me. "You can't leave me here. I don't have a ride. I don't have any money for a cab." I didn't stop. I didn't turn around. I walked through the tables, past the staring diners, out into the cool Chicago night. I signaled for my driver. As the car pulled away, I looked out the window. I saw Dante standing on the sidewalk in front of the hotel. He was alone. He looked small against the towering buildings. It broke my heart to leave him there. But I knew that if he was ever going to become a man, he had to survive the night as a child alone in the dark. I leaned back in the seat and closed my eyes. To the hospital, I told the driver, "I need to see my wife." The legal war with Tiffany was over. She was in the system now. But the war for Dante's soul had just begun, and the only weapon I had left was silence. The sidewalk outside the Drake Hotel was cold, and the wind coming off Lake Michigan cut through the fabric of expensive suits like a knife. I sat in the back of my town car with the window rolled down just an inch, watching my son standing on the curb. He looked like a ghost. The color had drained from his face, leaving him gray and ashen under the yellow streetlights. He was shivering, but I knew it wasn't just from the temperature. It was the shivering of a man whose entire reality had just shattered into a million jagged pieces. He looked at the car. He knew I was inside. He took a step forward, his hand reaching out instinctively toward the door handle, toward safety, toward the bank of Dad that had been open for business for 32 years. I signaled the driver to wait. I needed to say one last thing. I rolled the window down halfway. Dante's eyes lit up with a pathetic, desperate hope. He rushed to the window, gripping the frame with white knuckles. "Dad," he gasped. "Thank God. I knew you wouldn't leave me. Open the door. Please. I have nowhere to go. My key card for the house doesn't work. My credit cards are dead. I don't even have cash for the train." I looked at him. I looked at the tears freezing on his cheeks. I felt a physical pain in my chest, a twisting ache that every parent knows when their child is hurting. But I also remembered the sound of the glue bottle being squeezed. I remembered the smirk on his face as he filmed his mother's potential humiliation. "I am not unlocking the door, Dante," I said, my voice quiet and steady. Dante's face crumbled. "What? But you can't leave me here. It is midnight. I am your son." "That is exactly why I am leaving you here," I said. "Because for 32 years I have cushioned every fall. I have paid every fine. I have fixed every mistake. And look at you. You are not a man. You are a child in a costume." Dante sobbed, shaking his head. "I will change, Dad. I swear. Just give me a ride home. Give me $500 just to get a hotel for the night. I will pay you back." I shook my head slowly. "You don't get it, do you, son? You still think this is about money. This isn't about money. It is about survival. You need to learn how to survive without me. You need to learn what bread costs when you have to sweat for it. You need to learn what a roof is worth when you have to build it yourself." I leaned back into the shadows of the car. "Before you were a husband, before you were a prankster, You were a man, Dante. Find that man again. Because the boy you are right now, I can't help him anymore. I tapped the glass. The driver understood. No, Dad, wait, Dante screamed, slapping the window. Don't go. Dad. The car pulled away smoothly, gliding into the Chicago traffic. I didn't look back. I couldn't. If I looked back, I might have stopped, and stopping would have been the cruelest thing I could do. The next few weeks were a blur of reports from my private investigator, Malone. I didn't contact Dante directly, but I watched him from a distance like a hawk circling a fledgling that had been kicked out of the nest. The fall was swift and brutal. The next morning, Dante showed up at his job. He worked as a junior marketing associate at a firm owned by one of my old golf buddies. It was a job I had secured for him, a job where he did very little work for a very generous salary. He swiped his badge at the turnstile. It blinked red. Access denied. He tried again. Red. A security guard approached him. It wasn't the friendly guy he usually high-fived. It was the head of security. He was holding a cardboard box, Mr. Thorne, the guard said loud enough for the morning lobby rush to hear. You are not permitted in the building. Dante tried to argue. What are you talking about? I work here. I have a meeting at 10. Not anymore, the guard said, handing him the box. Your employment has been terminated effective immediately. The company has a strict morality clause regarding criminal investigations and fraud. We saw the news, Mr. Thorne. We saw the arrest of your wife. And we received a call from the bank regarding the investigation into your finances. We don't want the liability. Dante stood there in the lobby holding a box containing a stapler, a coffee mug, and a framed photo of him and Tiffany. His co-workers walked past him, eyes averted, pretending not to see the man who had become a social pariah overnight. He was escorted out of the building. He stood on the sidewalk unemployed and unemployable. 2 days later, the BMW was repossessed. Dante had parked it on a side street trying to hide it, but repo men are like bloodhounds. Malone sent me a video of the event. Dante came running out of a cheap motel he had crashed in, screaming at the tow truck driver. He tried to physically block the truck. The driver, a large man who had seen it all, just laughed and hooked up the chains. Make your payments, kid, the driver said as he hoisted the $60,000 car into the air. Dante watched his last symbol of status disappear around the corner. He was left standing in the street with 2 suitcases and a box of office supplies. He had hit rock bottom, or so he thought. But rock bottom has a basement. With no credit, no job, and a frozen bank account, no landlord in the city would touch him. He applied for apartments in the trendy neighborhoods he was used to. He was laughed out of the leasing offices. They ran his background check and saw the pending investigation for financial fraud. The door slammed shut. He had to go lower. He ended up in the South Side in a neighborhood that gentrification had forgotten. Malone sent me the address. It was a dilapidated brick building with bars on the windows and a front door that didn't lock. He rented a studio apartment in the basement. It wasn't really an apartment. It was a converted storage room, 300 square feet, one tiny window that looked out onto a brick wall, a hot plate instead of a stove, a mattress on the floor because he couldn't afford a bed frame. The rent was $600 a month. He paid the first month by pawning his Rolex, the watch I gave him for graduation, the watch he promised to pass down to his son. He got $2,000 for a $10,000 watch because he was desperate and the pawnbroker smelled blood. Now he had a roof. But he had no food, and he had debt. The credit card companies were calling 5 times a day. The lawyers for the hotel in Napa were sending threatening letters. Dante needed money. He applied for jobs, marketing, sales, consultant. He got 0 interviews. His name was toxic. A simple Google search brought up the viral video of the wedding, the news of Tiffany's arrest, and the allegations of elder abuse. No company wanted that baggage. He had to swallow his pride. He had to do work that didn't require a background check or a reputation. He downloaded a food delivery app. He didn't have a car, so he bought a cheap second-hand bicycle from a neighbor. My son, who used to complain if the valet took too long to bring his luxury sedan, was now pedaling a rusty 10-speed through the rain with a thermal bag strapped to his back. Malone sent me a photo of him a week later. It broke me. Dante was soaking wet. He was wearing a cheap plastic poncho. He was standing on the porch of a nice house in Lincoln Park, a house very similar to the one he grew up in. He was handing a bag of Thai food to a guy who looked about his age. The guy took the food and didn't even look at Dante. He just grabbed the bag and slammed the door. Dante stood there for a moment looking at the closed door. looking at the warm golden light spilling out from the windows. He could probably smell the food. He could probably hear the laughter from inside. He checked his phone, tipped $2. He got back on his bike and pedaled away into the dark. I sat in my study looking at that photo. I wanted to cry. I wanted to drive down there and pick him up and wrap him in a warm towel and give him a steak dinner. But I forced myself to close the file. He was working. For the first time in his life, he was actually working. He was feeling the burn in his legs. He was feeling the sting of being invisible. He was learning the value of $1 because he had to pedal 3 miles to earn 5 of them. One night, about a month after the wedding, my phone rang. It was Dante. I hesitated. Beatrice was asleep upstairs. The house was quiet. I picked up. Dad. Dante's voice was different. It wasn't the whining voice of the boy at the hotel. It was tired. It was rough. "Hello, Dante," I said. "I am not calling for money, Dad," he said quickly. I know that is not happening. Then why are you calling?" I asked. There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear the sound of traffic in the background. He was probably sitting on a curb somewhere waiting for his next delivery order. I delivered a pizza tonight," Dante said, his voice cracking slightly. "It was to a family, a mom and a dad and a little boy. They were watching a movie. They looked so happy, Dad. Just normal." I waited, holding my breath. And I remembered the glue Dante whispered. I remembered what Tiffany did. And I remembered that I laughed. I stood there and I filmed it and I laughed. He let out a shuddering breath. "I am a monster, Dad. I see it now. I looked at that family tonight and I realized I don't deserve that. I don't deserve to be happy. Not after what I did to Mom." I closed my eyes, tears finally leaking out. "You are not a monster, Dante," I said softly. "You were lost. You were asleep." "I am awake now," he said. "I am tired, Dad. My legs hurt. My back hurts. I live in a hole. But I am awake." "Good," I said. "Stay awake, son." I wanted to say more. I wanted to tell him I loved him, but he wasn't ready. He needed to sit with that guilt. He needed to let it burn the rest of the entitlement out of his system. "I have to go," Dante said. "I got another order. Someone wants sushi." "Ride safe, Dante," I said. "Yeah. Bye, Dad." The line went dead. I put the phone down. I walked to the window and looked out at the city skyline. Somewhere out there in the maze of streets, my son was riding a bike in the dark, carrying someone else's dinner. He was suffering. He was struggling. But for the first time in 32 years, I was proud of him. He was finally becoming a man. But the lesson wasn't over yet. Dante was learning humility, but the legal hammer was about to fall on Tiffany, and the trial was going to drag all the ugly details back into the light. Dante would have to testify. He would have to stand up in court and point the finger at the woman he thought was his soulmate. It would be the final test. Would he lie to save her, or would he tell the truth to save himself? The Cook County Criminal Courthouse is a building designed to make you feel small. It is a monolith of gray stone and heavy doors where the air always smells of floor wax and stale anxiety. I sat in the third row of Gallery Courtroom 402, clutching my hat in my hands. The wood of the bench was hard against my back, but I didn't shift. I had waited 3 months for this moment. I could wait a few more minutes. Beatrice wasn't with me. She wanted to come, but her doctor advised against it. The stress of seeing the woman who tried to cripple her was too high a risk for her heart. So I sat alone, representing the victims, representing the family that Tiffany Miller had tried to burn to the ground. When the bailiff announced the court was in session, we all stood up. A side door opened and Tiffany was led in. She looked nothing like the girl who had sneered at me in the vineyard. The blonde hair that used to be blown out to perfection was now tied back in a messy bun showing dark roots that hadn't been touched up in 12 weeks. She wasn't wearing an $8,000 silk dress. She was wearing a beige pantsuit that looked like it came from a thrift store rack, ill-fitting and drab. She didn't look at the gallery. She stared at her hands, which were clasped tightly on the defense table. She looked smaller. The grandiosity of her narcissism had been stripped away by the cold, hard reality of the legal system. She was no longer Tiffany Thorne, the influencer. She was defendant number 29,482. The trial itself was short. It wasn't the media circus she had hoped for. There were no cameras allowed in the courtroom, much to her disappointment. There were no fans screaming her name outside. There was just a bored stenographer, a stern prosecutor, and a judge who looked like she had zero patience for nonsense. The evidence was overwhelming. My private investigator Malone had provided a paper trail so thick it could stop a bullet. The marriage certificate from Las Vegas, the bank records showing the unauthorized transfer of $20,000, the video footage of the glue prank. But the most damning evidence didn't come from a document. It came from a witness. The prosecutor called Dante to the stand. I watched my son walk up the aisle. He looked different. He had lost weight. His face was leaner, his jawline sharper. He was wearing a cheap suit, probably bought at a discount outlet, but his shirt was pressed and his tie was straight. His hands were rough scarred from 3 months of gripping bicycle handlebars and carrying takeout bags in the Chicago winter. He took the oath. He sat down. Dante looked at Tiffany. For a moment I saw a flicker of the old Dante, the one who was desperate for her approval. Tiffany looked back at him, her eyes pleading, her lips trembling. She was trying to cast one last spell, but the spell was broken. Mr. Thorne, the prosecutor asked, "Did you witness the defendant applying adhesive to your mother's chair on the day of the wedding?" Dante took a deep breath. He looked at me sitting in the gallery. I nodded once. A microscopic movement. "Yes," Dante said, his voice steady. "I did." "And did you attempt to stop her?" "No." "Why not?" Dante looked down at his hands. "Because I was holding the camera," he said. "Because I thought it would make us famous. Because I was weak." A ripple of murmurs went through the courtroom. It was a confession not of a crime, but of a moral failure. "And the money," the prosecutor continued. "The $20,000 taken from your parents' account. Did the defendant instruct you to take it?" Dante looked at Tiffany. Her eyes were hard, now filled with hate. "She told me she needed it for her career," Dante said. "She told me it was an investment. I didn't know it was to pay off a loan shark in Las Vegas. I didn't know she was already married. I trusted her." He paused. "I betrayed my mother for a lie," he whispered. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. No further questions." Dante stepped down. He walked past Tiffany without looking at her. He walked past me and sat in the back row, his head bowed. The defense attorney, a public defender who looked exhausted, tried to paint Tiffany as a victim of circumstances. He talked about her difficult childhood. He talked about the pressure of social media. He argued that the bigamy was a misunderstanding, that she thought the first marriage was annulled. It was a weak defense, and the judge knew it. Judge Patterson, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair, peered over her glasses at Tiffany. "Stand up, Ms. Miller," the judge ordered. Tiffany stood up, her legs shaking. "I have heard the evidence," Judge Patterson said. "And frankly, I am disgusted. You preyed on the elderly. You manipulated a weak-minded man, and you used the sacred institution of marriage as a shield for your criminal activities." Tiffany began to cry. "I am sorry, Your Honor," she sobbed. "I just wanted to be somebody. I just wanted people to like me." The judge wasn't moved. "You wanted fame," Judge Patterson said. "Well, you are going to get a very specific kind of notoriety today." The judge opened the file in front of her. "On the charge of bigamy, I find you guilty. On the charge of grand larceny, guilty. On the charge of elder abuse, guilty." Tiffany let out a wail that echoed off the high ceilings. However, the judge continued, raising her voice. "Since this is your first felony conviction in this state, and since the prisons are overcrowded, I am going to be creative with your sentence." I leaned forward. This was the moment. "I am sentencing you to 5 years of probation," Judge Patterson announced. "During this time, you will complete 2,000 hours of community service. You will be assigned to the city sanitation department. You will be picking up trash on the side of the highway, Ms. Miller. You wanted to be seen by the public. Now the public will see you in an orange vest cleaning up garbage." Tiffany gasped. "Trash," she whispered. Furthermore, the judge said, "You are ordered to pay full restitution to Elijah and Beatrice Thorne. The $20,000 you stole, plus the legal fees, plus the cost of the wedding you ruined. That is a total of $180,000. Your wages will be garnished until every cent is paid." "But I can't pay that," Tiffany screamed. "I have no job." "Then you better find one," the judge said coldly. "But not the job you want." The judge leaned forward, delivering the final blow. "I am issuing a permanent injunction regarding your online presence. As a condition of your probation, you are hereby banned from creating, posting, or monetizing any content on any social media platform. Your TikTok account is to be deleted immediately. Your Instagram is to be scrubbed. You are not to appear in any videos, yours or anyone else's. If I catch you posting so much as a selfie, I will revoke your probation and send you to prison for 5 years. Do you understand?" The courtroom went silent. For a girl like Tiffany, this was a death sentence. Taking away her phone was worse than taking away her freedom. Taking away her audience was like cutting off her oxygen. "No," she shrieked, clutching the table. "You can't do that. That is my life. I have followers. I am an influencer." "You were an influencer," the judge corrected. "Now you are a convict. Case closed." The gavel banged down. Bang! It was the sound of a heavy door slamming shut on a shallow life. The bailiff moved in to take Tiffany away for processing. She fought him. She looked back at the gallery, scanning the faces. She saw me. Elijah. She screamed, her face twisted and ugly. "Help me. Don't let them delete my account. Please. It is all I have." I looked at her. I didn't smile. I didn't frown. I didn't feel happy. I just felt a deep, profound sense of relief. The tumor had been cut out. The infection was gone. I watched as they dragged her through the side door. Her screams faded into the hallway. "My followers. My fans. You can't do this." Then she was gone. The courtroom was quiet again. I stood up. My knees popped slightly. I felt lighter than I had in years. I walked to the back of the room. Dante was sitting there, his hands covering his face. I stopped at his row. "Dante," I said. He looked up. His eyes were red. "Is she gone?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "She is gone." Dante nodded slowly. He looked at his hands, the rough skin, the bitten fingernails. "I have a shift tonight," he said, his voice hollow. "It is supposed to snow. People order a lot of pizza when it snows." I looked at my son. He wasn't asking for a ride. He wasn't asking for a loan. He was stating a fact about his life. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a pair of leather gloves. They were my driving gloves lined with cashmere. "Here," I said, handing them to him. "It is going to be cold on that bike." Dante looked at the gloves. He took them hesitantly. "Thanks, Dad," he whispered. I put a hand on his shoulder. I squeezed it tight. "Ride safe, Dante," I said. I turned and walked out of the courtroom. I walked down the long marble hallway and pushed open the heavy doors. The Chicago wind hit me in the face, bracing and cold. It smelled of exhaust and winter and freedom. I walked down the steps to the street. I didn't look back at the courthouse. I hailed a cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. "Home," I said. "My wife is waiting for me." As the cab pulled away into traffic, I closed my eyes. Justice is a messy business. It takes time, it takes money, and it takes a toll on your heart. But as I watched the city blur past the window, I knew one thing for sure. Beatrice was safe, the glue was gone, and the house was clean. And sometimes a clean house is the only victory that matters. The silence in our house used to terrify me. In the weeks after the wedding fiasco, when Beatrice was in the hospital, and Dante was spiraling into the abyss, the silence felt heavy, like a physical weight pressing down on my chest. It felt like the end of something. But now, 3 months later, the silence has changed. It has become peaceful. It is the quiet hum of a machine that is finally running smoothly after years of grinding gears. I walked into the sunroom carrying a tray with 2 cups of herbal tea and a plate of sliced pears. Beatrice was sitting in her new armchair. It was a sturdy leather recliner, not a high-backed velvet throne. We threw the old chairs away. We didn't even donate them. I didn't want anyone else to inherit that bad energy. Beatrice looked up as I entered. The color had returned to her cheeks. The gray pallor of the stroke scare was gone, replaced by the warm brown tone that I had fallen in love with 50 years ago. She was knitting again. Her hands, which had trembled so violently in the hospital, were steady now, moving the needles with a rhythm that sounded like rain on a tin roof. She smiled at me. It was a genuine smile, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. There was a shadow there, a permanent bruise on her heart that only a mother can understand. "Thank you, Elijah," she said, taking the tea. "You spoil me." I sat down on the ottoman facing her. "I am just protecting my investment, B," I teased gently. "You are the CEO of this operation. I can't have you calling in sick." She chuckled softly, but then her gaze drifted to the window, looking out at the garden where the hydrangeas were beginning to bloom. "Have you heard from him?" she asked. She didn't have to say his name. Dante was the ghost that lived in the pauses of our conversation. I took a sip of tea before answering. I wanted to be honest, but I also wanted to be kind. "I saw him," I said, "at the courthouse. He looked tired, but he looked clear. He is working, B. He is surviving." Beatrice nodded slowly. A tear escaped her eye and rolled down her cheek, but she didn't wipe it away. She let it fall. I miss him, Elijah, she whispered. I miss the little boy who used to run into the kitchen with muddy knees asking for cookies. I miss the teenager who used to ask me to tie his tie before prom. I know he became something else, but I miss my son. I reached out and covered her hands with mine, stopping the knitting needles. I miss him too, B, I said, my voice thick with emotion. I miss him every day, but the man who tried to hurt you, the man who stole your surgery money that wasn't our son, that was a stranger infected by greed, and the only way to get our son back is to let that stranger starve. Beatrice squeezed my hand. Her grip was strong. I know, she said. You did the right thing, Elijah. I was angry at first. When you told me you froze the accounts, when you told me he was homeless, I wanted to scream at you. I wanted to drive into the city and save him. A mother's instinct is to shield her child from the fire. She took a deep breath. But then I remembered the glue, she said, her voice hardening slightly. I remembered the look on Tiffany's face, and I realized that if we saved him again, we would just be buying him another ticket to hell. He needs to walk through the fire, Elijah. It is the only way to burn off the rot. I nodded. It is the hardest thing I have ever done, B. Leaving him on that curb. It broke me. Beatrice leaned forward. It didn't break you, she said fiercely. It proved you are a father, a real father. A weak father would have written a check. A strong father teaches the lesson even when it hurts. We sat in silence for a moment, letting the truth settle between us. We were united. We were a front. Then Beatrice looked at the stack of papers on the side table. It was a binder from our estate planner. So she said, wiping her eyes and straightening her back, "What do we do with it?" "With what?" "The money," she said. "The trust fund. The Dante fund." I looked at the binder. There was nearly $2 million sitting in an investment account. It was money we had scraped and saved for 40 years. It was money I made working double shifts on the loading docks. It was money Beatrice saved by clipping coupons and sewing her own clothes. It was supposed to be his safety net. It was supposed to be the foundation of the Thorne dynasty, but now it was just a pile of cash with no destination. And in logistics, cargo that has no destination is a liability. It takes up space. It gathers dust. We can't keep it, I said. If we keep it, we will always be tempted to give it to him. Every time he calls, every time he stumbles, we will think about that money sitting there. It will be a crutch waiting to happen. Beatrice nodded, agreeing. And we can't spend it on ourselves. We have everything we need. This house, this garden, each other. So I said, we need a new destination. We need to redirect the shipment. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the street. I thought about my own beginning. I thought about being 20 years old in Chicago with nothing but a strong back and a refusal to quit. I thought about the trade school that gave me a scholarship to learn supply chain management. That scholarship was only $500, but it changed the trajectory of my entire life. I turned back to Beatrice. "Do you remember the day I got my first management promotion?" I asked. She smiled. "I do. We went to Red Lobster to celebrate. You wore your blue suit." I laughed. "I did. And I remember telling you that I wished more kids from my neighborhood knew about this industry. Everyone wants to be a rapper or an athlete. No one tells them that you can become a millionaire by moving boxes if you know how to do it right." Beatrice's eyes lit up. She saw where I was going. "Logistics," she said. "Yes," I said. "Logistics, trades, plumbers, electricians, the people who build this country, the people who actually work for a living." I walked back to the ottoman and sat down, leaning in close to her. "What if we take the Dante Fund," I said, "and we turn it into the Thorne Pathways Scholarship?" Beatrice put down her knitting needles completely. She was listening intently. "We don't send them to fancy liberal arts colleges to learn how to be influencers." I continued, getting excited. "We send them to trade schools. We pay for their CDL licenses so they can drive trucks. We pay for their apprenticeships in HVAC. We find the kids who are hungry, B, the kids who are like Dante is right now struggling to survive but willing to work. And we give them a chance," Beatrice whispered. "Exactly. We give them the ladder. But they have to climb it. No handouts, just opportunities." Beatrice looked at the binder. Then she looked at me. Her eyes were shining with tears again. But these were different tears. These were tears of purpose. "It is beautiful, Elijah," she said. It is perfect. It turns all this ugliness into something green, something that grows. She reached for the binder and opened it. "Let's do it," she said. "Let's do it today. Call Harrison. Tell him to draw up the papers." I didn't wait. I pulled out my phone right there in the sunroom. I called Harrison, my lawyer. "Harrison," I said when he answered, "don't bill me for this call, but I have a job for you." "What is it?" Elijah Harrison asked. "Are we suing someone else?" "No," I said, smiling at my wife. "We are building something. I want you to liquidate the Dante Thorne Trust. Every penny." And then I asked, "And then I want you to draft a charter for a non-profit. The Thorne Pathways Foundation. Its mission is to fund vocational education for underprivileged youth in the South Side of Chicago." Harrison paused on the other end of the line. "That is a lot of money, Elijah," he said. "Are you sure? Once you do this, you can't undo it. If Dante comes back, I said, looking at Beatrice, "he can apply for a scholarship. If he wants to learn how to weld or drive a forklift, we will pay for his classes. But he gets in line like everyone else." I heard Harrison chuckle. "You are a tough old bird, Elijah. I am a realist, Harrison. Draw it up. I want to sign it before dinner." I hung up the phone. I looked at Beatrice. She looked lighter. The weight of the money, the burden of the inheritance that had poisoned our son, was gone. We spent the rest of the afternoon planning. We talked about the criteria. We decided we wanted an essay component. We wanted to hear their stories. We wanted to know what they would do with the opportunity. We decided that the scholarship wouldn't just be a check. It would come with mentorship. I would meet with these kids. I would teach them what I knew. I would be the father figure to 50 kids that I struggled to be for one. As the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the room, Beatrice closed the binder. "You know, Elijah," she said softly, "I think this is what your mother would have wanted. She worked so hard as a maid so you could go to school. She understood the value of a trade. She would have loved it." I agreed. Beatrice stood up. She winced slightly as her hip took her weight, but she didn't reach for her walker. She stood on her own 2 feet, steady and strong. "I'm going to make dinner," she announced. "I am thinking gumbo." I stood up and offered her my arm. "Allow me to escort you, Madam President," I said. She took my arm and we walked to the kitchen together. The house was still quiet, but it wasn't empty anymore. It was filled with potential. It was filled with the ghosts of the future, the hundreds of young men and women whose lives were about to change because a young girl named Tiffany tried to buy a viral video with a bottle of glue. She wanted to break us. She wanted to strip us of our dignity. Instead, she gave us a mission. And as I chopped the celery for the gumbo, listening to Beatrice hum a gospel song, I realized that for the first time in a long time, I wasn't worried about my legacy. My legacy wasn't my bloodline. It wasn't my name on a building. My legacy was the work. And the work was just beginning. The seasons in Chicago marked time better than any clock. We had watched the leaves turn gold, then fall, then get buried in snow, and now the green shoots of spring were pushing through the hard earth again. It had been exactly 1 year since the trial. 1 year of silence from my son. 1 year of healing for my wife. I was in the garage organizing my tool bench. It is a habit I kept from my days on the loading dock. A clean workspace means a clear mind. Beatrice was inside roasting a chicken for Sunday dinner. The smell of rosemary and lemon drifted out to the driveway. It was peaceful. It was the life I had fought for. Then I saw him. He didn't pull up in a leased BMW. He didn't jump out of an Uber. He was walking up the long driveway on foot, coming from the direction of the bus stop 3 blocks away. I put down my wrench and wiped my greasy hands on a rag. I stood there and watched him approach. If I hadn't known his walk, the specific cadence of his stride, I might not have recognized him. Dante had changed. The soft, doughy look of a man who spent his life eating expense account lunches was gone. He was thin, wiring. His face was darker tanned, not by a vacation in Cabo, but by the harsh, unforgiving sun of outdoor labor. He was wearing a pair of work boots that were scuffed at the toes and a flannel shirt that had been washed so many times it was fading. He stopped at the edge of the garage. He didn't come in. He respected the boundary. "Hello, Dad," he said. His voice was different too. It was deeper. It lacked the whine, the frantic energy of entitlement. It was the voice of a man who was too tired to play games. "Hello, Dante," I said, leaning against the workbench. He looked at me, then he looked at his boots. He seemed unsure of what to do with his hands. "I didn't know if I should come," he said. "I walked to the bus stop 3 times last month and turned around, but it is Sunday. Mom always makes chicken on Sunday." I nodded. "She does." Dante shifted his weight. He was holding a plastic grocery bag. It wasn't from Whole Foods. It was from the discount market down on 47th Street. "I brought something," he said. He stepped forward cautiously like a stray dog approaching a porch. He held out the bag. I took it. It was heavy. I looked inside. Oranges. A bag of navel oranges. "They were on sale," Dante said quickly. "But I checked them. They are firm. I know Mom likes fresh juice in the morning." I looked at the oranges. Then I looked at his hands. They were destroyed. The manicured fingernails were gone. His knuckles were swollen. The skin on his palms was thick and yellow with calluses. There was a fresh cut on his thumb wrapped in electrical tape instead of a bandage. "I work at a distribution center now," Dante said, noticing my gaze. "Over in Cicero, I load trucks. 3rd shift. You are a loader?" I asked. He nodded. "It is hard work. My back kills me. But it is honest. I get paid every Friday. And I pay my rent." He looked me in the eye. "I pay my own rent, Dad. Every dime." I felt a lump form in my throat. I remembered loading trucks in 1970. I remembered the ache in my shoulders, the way the cold seeped into your bones at 3 in the morning. He was walking in my footsteps. Not the path I paved for him, but the path I had walked myself. "I didn't steal these," Dante added softly. "I bought them. With my wages." "I know you did, son," I said. Just then the door to the house opened. Beatrice stepped out onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Elijah, who are you talking to?" she asked. Then she saw him. She froze. Her hand went to her mouth. "Dante," she whispered. Dante looked at his mother. He saw the cane she still used sometimes. He saw the gray in her hair. "Hi, Mom," he choked out. Beatrice didn't run to him. She didn't scream. She stayed on the porch, protecting her heart. She had learned the hard way that love requires boundaries. Dante took a step back. He didn't try to hug her. He understood that he had lost that privilege. "I just wanted to drop these off," he said, pointing to the bag in my hand. "And I wanted to say something." He took a deep breath. He stood up straight. He didn't look like a boy anymore. He looked like a man facing a firing squad. "I am sorry," he said. He didn't say "I am sorry," but he didn't say "I am sorry." Tiffany made me do it. He didn't say "I am sorry I got caught." "I was wrong," he continued. "I was selfish. I was weak. I let a stranger come into our house and disrespect you because I was too much of a coward to be a man. I stole from you, Mom. I stole your safety, and I hate myself for it every single day." Tears began to run down his weathered cheeks, cutting tracks through the dust on his face. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said. "I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I know. I finally know what you gave me. And I know what I threw away." He wiped his eyes with the back of his rough hand. "That is it. That is all." He turned around. He started walking back down the driveway. I stood there holding the bag of oranges. I waited. I waited for the turn. I waited for him to stop and say, "By the way, Dad, I am a little short on rent." Or, "My bike has a flat tire." I watched him walk 10 feet, 20 feet. He didn't stop. He kept walking, his shoulders hunched against the wind, heading back to the bus stop, to go back to his basement apartment and his 3rd shift job. He wasn't asking for anything. He had passed the test. I looked at Beatrice. She was crying silent tears. She nodded at me. "Dante," I called out. He stopped. He turned around. He looked hopeful, but scared. "Yeah, Dad." I held up the bag. "These oranges look good," I said, "but they go better with chicken." Dante stared at me. "Are you hungry?" I asked. He hesitated. I usually eat before my shift. I had a sandwich earlier." "Don't lie to me, Dante," I said sternly. "I know what a loader's salary buys. You are hungry." He looked down. "Yeah, I am starving." "Then come inside," I said. "Wash your hands. Use the good soap. You have grease on them." Dante looked at Beatrice. She smiled. It was a small, cautious smile, but it was there. "There is plenty of chicken," she said. Dante walked back up the driveway. He walked slowly as if he couldn't believe the ground was solid beneath his feet. He walked past me into the garage. He smelled of sweat and diesel fuel and hard work. It was the best he had ever smelled. We went inside. He washed his hands in the kitchen sink, scrubbing the grime away. He sat at the table, not at the head of the table. He sat at the side. We ate. It was quiet. We didn't talk about Tiffany. We didn't talk about the trial. We didn't talk about the money he lost or the friends who abandoned him. We talked about the weather. We talked about the Bulls game. We talked about the logistics of loading a pallet so it doesn't shift in transit. I watched him eat. He ate with gratitude. He didn't complain that the chicken was too dry or the wine wasn't expensive enough. He cleaned his plate. When dinner was over, he stood up. "I should go," he said. "I can't be late. My foreman is a hard ass. If I am 2 minutes late, he docks my pay." I nodded. "Respect the foreman. He puts food on your table." Dante walked to the door. Beatrice gave him a small plastic container with leftovers. "For your lunch break," she said. "Thanks, Mom," he said, taking it like it was gold. He walked out onto the porch. I followed him. "Dad," he said, turning to me. "Yes. Thank you. For the food. And for not calling the police when I showed up." I leaned against the doorframe. "I don't call the police on guests, Dante, and tonight you were a guest." He nodded, understanding the distinction. He wasn't a resident. He wasn't an owner. He was a guest. He had to earn his way back. He hesitated. His hand lingered on the railing. This was the moment. The old Dante would have asked now. He would have said, "Dad, since we are cool now, can I borrow $50? I watched him struggle. I saw the old habits fighting with the new reality. He took a deep breath. "See you later, Dad," he said. He turned and walked down the steps. He didn't ask. He walked into the night clutching his Tupperware container, heading for the bus. I watched him go until he disappeared around the corner. I went back inside. Beatrice was washing the dishes. "He looks thin," she said. "He looks strong," I corrected. "He looks like he is finally carrying his own weight." "Did you give him money?" she asked without looking up. "No," I said. "Good," she said. I picked up an orange from the bag he brought. I peeled it. The zest sprayed into the air, smelling sharp and sweet. I handed a slice to Beatrice. She ate it. "It is sweet," she said. "It is," I agreed. It was the sweetest orange I had ever tasted, because it was bought with dignity. We were back at zero. The bank account was empty. The trust was gone. The luxury was gone. But as I locked the front door that night, I realized we had something better than a surplus. We had a foundation. Dante was at the bottom of the ladder. But for the first time in his life, his feet were on the rungs and his hands were gripping the sides, and he was climbing under his own power. It would take him years to get back to where he started. Maybe he never would. Maybe he would drive a forklift for the rest of his life. And that would be okay. Because I would rather have a son who drives a forklift and brings me oranges he paid for than a son who drives a Porsche and plots my death. I turned off the porch light. The nightmare was over. The hunt was done. Now we just had to live. And living, I realized, is the hardest work of all. But we were ready for it. The water of the Caribbean is different from the water of Lake Michigan. In Chicago, the water is dark and brooding like it holds too many secrets. But here, off the coast of St. Lucia, the water is turquoise and clear. It looks like liquid glass. I sat on the aft deck of the catamaran we had chartered for the week, watching the wake churn behind us. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of violet and burning orange. I wasn't wearing a suit. I wasn't wearing a tie. I was wearing linen pants and a loose shirt, and for the first time in 40 years, I wasn't wearing a watch. I didn't need to know what time it was. I didn't have a meeting. I didn't have a court date. I didn't have to check my bank account to see if my son had drained it. Beatrice was sitting next to me on a white cushioned bench. She was wearing a wide-brimmed hat and big sunglasses, looking every bit the queen she is. Her walker was folded up in the corner. She didn't need it as much lately. The stress that had been eating at her joints, the cortisol that had been pumping through her veins because of Tiffany's cruelty, had finally subsided. Beatrice was healing. She reached out and took my hand. Her skin was warm from the sun. "This is nice, Elijah," she whispered. I squeezed her hand. "It is better than nice be," I said. "It is quiet." We sat there for a long time, just listening to the wind snap the sails. In the silence, my mind drifted back to Chicago. It drifted back to the image of Dante walking away from our porch in the dark. A lot of people told me I was cold. Even my own brother called me heartless for letting Dante lose his job and his apartment. He asked me how a father could sleep at night knowing his only child was sleeping on a mattress on the floor in a basement. But looking at the peace on Beatrice's face, I knew I had made the right choice. You see, we tell ourselves lies about love. We tell ourselves that love means saying yes. We tell ourselves that love means giving until you are empty. We think that being a good parent means being a cushion that absorbs every impact so our children never feel the ground. But that isn't love, that is fear. I was afraid of Dante failing, so I crippled him with success. I was afraid of him being unhappy, so I bought him a happiness he didn't earn. And in doing so, I created a monster who thought it was okay to laugh while his wife tortured his mother. I had to become the villain in his story to save him. I had to become the monster he feared so he could find the man he was hiding. Cutting him off wasn't an act of hate. It was the most violent act of love I have ever committed. It was surgery, and surgery always bleeds. Beatrice turned to me, lowering her sunglasses. "What are you thinking about, Elijah?" she asked, knowing me too well. I smiled. "I am thinking about ungrafted trees," I said. "You know, in the orchards, if you don't prune the dead branches, the rot spreads to the trunk. You have to cut the sick wood to save the roots." She nodded, squeezing my hand tighter. "We save the roots, Elijah," she said. I looked at the horizon. Yes, we did. And we removed the parasite. Tiffany was gone, erased from our lives. She was somewhere in Chicago picking up trash by the highway, wearing an orange vest, serving her time. She wanted to be famous, and in a way, she got her wish. She was the cautionary tale of the county. Dante was struggling. He was tired. He was poor. But he was honest. And for the first time in his life, he was free. He was free from the expectation of being rich. He was free from the toxic woman who used him. He was free to build a life that belonged to him. I took a sip of my iced tea. I felt a profound sense of satisfaction. Not happiness exactly. Happiness is fleeting. This was something deeper. It was the feeling of a captain who has steered his ship through a hurricane and brought it safely into the harbor. The sails were torn, the deck was battered, but the ship was afloat and the cargo was safe. Beatrice leaned her head on my shoulder. "I love you, old man," she whispered. I kissed the top of her head. "I love you too, Bea." We watched the sun dip below the water, extinguishing the fire of the day. I was 74 years old. I had lost friends. I had lost money. I had lost the illusion of a perfect family. But I had kept my dignity, and I had protected my wife. And as the stars began to come out over the Caribbean, I realized that was enough. Do not let anyone tell you that age makes you weak. Do not let them tell you that you have to tolerate disrespect just to keep the peace. Peace without respect is just submission. And I am a lion, not a lamb. The lion may be old, his mane may be gray, he may walk with a limp, but he still has claws, and he knows exactly when to use them. I closed my eyes and listened to the ocean. We were safe. Moral of the story. Respect is not a gift, it is a currency that must be earned. Elijah's story reminds us that enabling toxic behavior, even in our own children, is not love. It is destruction. When we allow disrespect to go unchecked, we invite chaos into our sanctuary. True leadership in a family means having the vision to see the rot and the courage to cut it out no matter how painful. Protect your partner, guard your dignity, and remember you cannot build a healthy future by funding the people who are actively trying to destroy your present. Boundaries are the highest form of self-care. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more. I want to know where you are watching from, so drop your city in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a tough decision to cut off a family member to save your peace? Tell me your story. I read every single comment. Until next time, stay strong and never let anyone glue you to a chair you didn't choose.